a break, and we'll be doing some logistical stuff about what our DC meeting is going to look like. And if you need to go at that point, I understand. The first place I want to call up right now is Superintendent Richard Woods of the Department of Education. And I'm not going to steal his thunder, but he got some really good news from the Department of Education lately. And as you know, the military is very, very interested in K-12 education. They says it's one of the number one things they're worried about or concerned about in reference to BRAC, in reference to the nation. So, Superintendent Richards.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, again, thank you. It's an honor to be with you today. Just as I begin, to give you a little bit of an overview of where we are in education in Georgia, and I'm very excited. I think that, since stepping into office 3 years ago, the trend that we were looking at, we are definitely, one of the rising stars throughout the nation. Right now, just in summary, we have about 1.8 million students to 2,300 schools, 180 districts throughout the state of Georgia. I'm proud to say that this year that we have had our highest graduation rate with the new, I guess the manner in which we calculate that. We're up to 80.6%. So again, my anticipation is by 2020 we will be at or exceed the national average in that. Also with the SAT and ACT scores, we have seen great improvement in that area. In the ACT, Georgia's average ACT score of 21.4 was higher than the national average this year for the second consecutive year and the second time in the state's history. Again, we outperformed the nation this year in English, reading, science, and mathematics. Also showed improvement on the percentage of students meeting the ACT College Readiness Benchmark and benchmarks present at the level of achievement and that predicts the student's success in corresponding college courses. With the SAT, Georgia, students outperformed the nation this year in evidence-based reading and writing. On the SAT, again, on the SAT, 1%. I think the highest performing state actually is about 3%. So I would definitely say I would take our top 3% against anyone's 3% in the state. But again, as far as the information and looking at Georgia State, one of the things we looked at in conjunction with the military, just recently, the Department of Education, in terms of dealing with personalized learning, we were the only state that was allowed to present as the Department of Defense. And again, this was quite a great honor. We are continuing to work with them as we move forward with that. They are very interested in what we are doing. And again, this is just a brief glimpse of who we are working with, but we are seeing some great trends with that. Was there a question, sir, or anything? Okay. But, that's something that as we continue to move on, it is definitely a need. And I think that as we look at our role and how we are having an impact on education, especially in the area of military. And again, as a personal note, I grew up in a military family. My dad served 20 years in the Navy, so I know the life of a military child. The challenges of seeing a parent be deployed for months on time was the life that I looked at. Also knowing the impact, within Georgia itself. I lived in Albany, Georgia for years, and again I saw, the impact of the closing of the naval base down there in that community. And I would even say that even today, I don't know that I can say that Albany has fully recovered, from the loss of the Naval Air Base down there. But also, I think yesterday I was visiting Byron Elementary and, giving out constitutions to our young fourth graders there. And again, of course, you know that area, if you're familiar with it, it's fairly close to Robbins Air Base. We were asked, or the principal asked, how many students have a mom or dad who's actively, in the service today, and probably at least a third to half of the students there within the fourth grade that I met with, raised their hands. And I think that, looking at the question that came out, one of the young people, I gave them a question in time, period there, and they asked me, said, Superintendent, when's this war going to end? Now that was a tough question to ask these young people. Coming from them, they know that their mom and dad, definitely the deployment, can go up to a year or greater. And so that has a lot of impact on the lives of their children. That's why I think for us in education it is extremely important that we support these families, again, from both a personal and a practical standpoint. But also if you look at Georgia itself, the economic impact, cannot be understated. I think the impact as you look at within Georgia, as far as Georgia's military, footprint, You know, we have the 5th largest military population, you know, within our nation. The Department of Defense is the largest employer in the state of Georgia. I think roughly about 300,000 plus individuals who are directly employed. That is not, you know, talk about, you know, the support that comes around or the businesses that are touched by that as well. And so, you know, this is quite a big, you know, momentum for us. The economic, you know, input is about $25 billion a year. So you can see this is not small chump change, but this has a great impact on us. And again, I think one of the, you know, other than agriculture, this is definitely one of the largest areas that support what's going on. But for us in the department itself, I do want to share you know, what is going on and what I would say is our comprehensive plan to both, you know, to support military family and service support throughout the state of Georgia. Today we have a military connected counselor, you know, school counselors project, again, that was funded, again, by the legislature. That is ongoing, you know, in which we are now, you know, letting schools and have supported schools with your, you know, generous, you know, funding and support at our, you know, largest base areas. You know, and this really goes a lot. Again, the social and emotional aspect, you know, making sure that these young people, as they travel into and out of states and nations, we need to make sure that we are giving them the best advice and the best counseling to meet, you know, both needs academically, but also on that social and emotional aspect as well. Also with that, we are looking at and we are creating something called a military-friendly school recognition. And I think this is something that as we move forward, for those of you who are familiar with this, you know, I am, you know, thinking of this of something that it will be a rubric. We are, you know, working with that rubric, and I think Representative Belton, you'll be a part of that discussion as well. You know, looking at what are the qualifiers that identify a school as being military friendly. So that's not necessarily someone that is in a, you know, a base area, but it could be an adjacent, you know, school as well, or in a district where we have a lot of students that live. And I think that as I look at this, it could be very similar to what we have our family friendly designation, our STEM and STEAM designation. Again, to make this, you know, something that again is not just a check in the box, but it really means that you are truly supporting our families. And so we look forward to working with that, and I look forward to one day being at the first school that is designated as a military-friendly school. Also, you know, currently we have military resources on the Department of Education website. Again, trying to do that, and I think trying to enhance that to make that even more clear. Again, because we do have quite a mobile society with that, and I think we need to look at that expansion. You know, furthermore, you know, since taking office, we have Military Child Month promotion, again, typically which takes place in April of each year, and that is something in which, you know, we send out information and encourage all of our schools and districts, you know, to do something special for our military children during that month, and again, to show that we support. And again, that, of course, as I shared, is 180 districts and potentially 2,300 schools throughout the state. Currently, we also, I believe, Dr. McGinley, we have a military student ID marker, so we can identify, you know, and keep track of the students that we have, so that we can find out specifically how they are doing, you know, within our schools. And again, I think on a side note to that, looking at the information that I saw this morning, our military students are doing quite well. They are actually performing in some cases much better than you know, the students here. But I think you have a lot of great support within the military. Mom and dad are typically at the house. You know, they're at home. You know, your medical needs are met on base. So again, you know, some great things that we know that if you look at the things that have an impact on education, a positive impact, the military helps provide that. And so I think that is definitely a model that we could use as we look forward. Not saying that, you know, our kids are doing bad, but definitely, you know, these kids definitely have some good support, and we appreciate their performance, you know, throughout our state. Also, I, you know, have plans that I think we should have a military student dashboard. This is something we are creating dashboards at this time, but this would allow communities to look and expand, you know, their operation to see specifically how their children are doing. But also we could put, you know, information that, you know, how does that have an impact on local areas as well. And we continue to have discussions with business. And again, our career pipeline is something that we could look at. And again, we'll be rolling out something called the Counselor Companion, which will have a lot of access, you know, to showing, you know, kids the opportunities that they have throughout the state. Also, I would always like to see the expansion of the Junior ROTC. I think that is a wonderful program. If you look at the number of individuals who actually enlist from the state of Georgia. We are one of the leading, states that bring young men and women to the service area. Yesterday I saw, again, at Byron Elementary, we had, the first time I've seen young people at an elementary school. We have a junior ROTC there. So I was quite proud. It was Navy. So for any of those who perhaps are served in other branches, that's quite all right. But I was quite proud to see, young, fifth graders march and do everything, and especially wearing navy blue and khaki. So I appreciate that. But at the end, again, what I will be making a formal request in the days to come. I think that it's extremely important that right now we do not really have an individual at the Department of Education who deals with individuals, whether it's junior ROTC, but also what I would say is a military family liaison. And I think this is extremely important. I think, again, as you go up to Washington, D.C., and meet with members of the military, the Department of Defense, and our congressional delegation, I would encourage you to share that this is what the Department of Education is committed to doing. And I think by having this individual, a military family and JROT support liaison, what this individual would do is they would oversee the military friendly school recognition. I think we actually have a manager that oversees, again, the STEM and STEAM and the family friendly designation. So this would help us to monitor what that looks like, and again, to make sure that we have high quality with that. Also, to oversee the Military Connected School Counselors Project, to make sure that we are meeting the needs. And if we need to make further requests and improvements, we will do that. Also, this individual would be over the junior ROTC program throughout the state. And this would show, again, a great backing. I think that, sometimes what I've seen is that individuals, if they do not have a representative up here, sometimes it looks like it's less than. Even though we have a very vibrant program throughout the state, this would allow us to become even more effective. Also, the Georgia Department, this individual would be a Georgia Department of Military Compact Commission representative. And again, I currently serve on that board. It's something where we meet, annually throughout the year, and again, to make sure that we are meeting the needs of, our military families, and to listen to what is going on from their perspective so that we can make the positive changes that need, or make sure that we are, heading down the correct path. Also, I think this individual would be a liaison between, the Department of Education, but also the U.S. Department of Defense. Again, having that direct, individual that would serve between that go-between would definitely help the communication so that we could listen as far as what the desire of the chiefs of staff and, again, the military at its highest level needs. Also, this person would support the military support communications and promotions throughout the state, and monitor schools with the highest student populations. Again, going back to the dashboard, so that we can make sure that we are not letting down children that are perhaps at the most critical. And again, as I close with this, I think it is something worth a note that if communities do not offer soldiers or soldiers' children a consistent high quality education, we risk losing bases. That's a definitely thing. I think with BRAC, it always is a reality that looms out there. But we want to make sure that we commit, and it's not so much that that I focus on BRAC, but I focus on these children. As I said, I grew up in a military family. I know what it means to live, and I know what it means to see Dad leave, and not to wonder. I know what it means to have a mother whose sole job is to take care of the family, and that's a hard life. I mean, it is a tough life. Because you always wonder about your loved one who is away, but also trying to make sure you have all the needs that are met. And also, when we look at this, 32% of military children score high risk for behavioral and mental health concerns. Those are things that we have to look at. We know that we have issues throughout the state that are associated with social and emotional learning and the aspects of life. But it is my commitment, again, a state school superintendent, that we will not neglect these children. They may not be a designated subgroup that is up there, though it shows up on any of our scores. But they are still a subgroup, and again, they are also children within the state of Georgia. So this is what, I appreciate the ability, Representative Belton, again, Chairman, and again, to all you members who are there and have committed to this, and again, for those who have served, thank you again for your service. But, as I wish to share, so we are prepared at the Department of Education to make sure that we are supporting these young people, supporting the communities that have these military institutions. And we want to make sure that we are the very best and we offer the very best to these young folks. So again, thank you for this time, and I appreciate the time you give me. Okay?
Thank you very much, Superintendent. The question from Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, for coming and sharing this information with us. You mentioned the military-friendly
Yes, sir.
program. And the kids that are deployed who miss their parents, we probably had the highest deployment number at Fort Stewart of any base in America. Over the last 10 years, 6 deployments. I've got 10-year-old children that at a point up until about a year ago, some of them had never seen their father or mother more than a 6-month period in their life.
Yes, sir.
Now, when you do this military-friendly award, I know there's going to be a certificate and an announcement.
Yes, sir.
But beyond that of substance, what's going to be the plan? One of my schools just got $25,000 a year ago for a recycling program. I mean, there's an old cliche, don't applaud, throw money. Tell me what you're throwing.
Well, I think as we look at this, and we'll be able, again, this is still a work in progress. As I shared, I know Representative Belton will be a part of this. But we are looking at, a designation as far as our school climate rating. I think that would be, again, to make sure that the climate of the school is conducive. We're looking at outcomes, of data, what percentage of the students, perform proficient on our testing. So again, we see some things there. Service programs, again, with this, and again, this is just, recommendations. Nothing is etched out. And again, if any member of the committee would like to be a part of the process, I mean, you have an open invitation to this. But we talk about, again, JOROTC, or talking about our counselors, move on when ready. Again, maybe doing some designation with that to help support that. Providing the training, the ropes, and perhaps some of the outdoor activities that support the engagement, again, what these young people are exposed to, but especially with the junior ROTC. Personal or personnel qualifications and background. My intent is that this individual, comes from the military. This is not, a bureaucrat that goes in and tells you how to do it, but, I think this is the person that definitely has to have lived as far as looking at the director. Community engagement, does the school give opportunity for military parents and their children to connect and feel supported? Relief for struggling students, local business, finance, college, scholarship opportunities. So that may be something, again, as we look at this, how do we better look at our dual enrollment, process, if you're talking about, funding and money. School engagement, does the military parents and their, children feel engaged and respected? This, again, is just a touch. I mean, yes, we have these banners, we have all these other things, but I think it's working with private sector. I think the VFW and some of these other organizations need to be involved in the process. Scholarships definitely could be something that we could, negotiate with. But I think the big thing is just seeing these parents that they know their kids are looked after.
To follow up,
Sure.
please. And I would hope that this committee, or the committee that does the military friendly,
Yes, sir.
certainly realize that there has to be a grading that is fair. You might have 10 military students in one school system.
Yes, sir.
In my school system, we have the highest percentage in Georgia.
Yes, sir.
And so we have to look at it like that. And I'm still very concerned about beyond the parade, the substance, because we've lost millions in military impact dollars from the federal government over the last 8-10 years. And it is vitally important to local systems that really hurt because of the loss of these impact funds. I want, where's the meat? That's all.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir.
And Representative Williams, I've been in discussion with the Department of Education several times. If you want to be part of that process, you're certainly welcome to do that. But there is going to be a fair rubric that is going to be done by a committee or this person we get to hire to make sure it is done fairly and make sure that there is a lot of meat to this. So if you want to be part of that process, it's certainly welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Clark? Did you have one down? I'm sorry, Representative
That's Representative Prince.
Sorry.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you for your service and all you guys are doing for our military families. My question, basically, as Representative Williams, I know a lot of his schools are what we call inside the perimeter on base. I want to talk about, or ask the question, are you guys addressing outside the perimeter? In my district, which is Richmond County, Augusta, Georgia, I have approximately 21 schools that are on this needs to improve, failing, whatever you want to call them.
Yes, sir.
Of those 21, approximately 6 are in maybe no more than 10 miles outside of the Fort Gordon gate. Most of them in Richmond County. We talk about this family, military friendly, what we want to do for the child, and I know we passed this House bill to deal with these, hopefully deal with these failing schools, but from your office, are you guys addressing anything in this, again, it's trying to relate to the military, because these kids are right outside the gate, the parents are deciding to move elsewhere, miles away from their work because of the school system. Is there any focus on those school systems that are in and around our military installations, not necessarily within the perimeter on the base? So, over.
Yes, sir. And again, if we look at this, again, if we begin the process here, again, as I've kind of shared, that will be one of the priorities that we have. I think being able to have the markers where we can identify where military students are. Again, we do have the ability to track that, internally. But, we look at, as far as looking at failing schools or any school, I said that's unacceptable in the state of Georgia. Now, we've done some restructuring. We have a new individual who is actually the head of the school improvement team, and that's Ms. Stephanie Johnson. To be honest, I cannot find a better person in the state of Georgia that leads that. We've had discussions with Richmond County, specifically with that, and Dr. Pringle, and we are bringing, the resources to bear, within those districts that, have a high percentage of schools that are there. So, we are actively moving in that area again throughout the state. So we're not leaving and making sure that we're not leaving anyone behind. Throughout this, as I've shared internally, I think over the past couple of years, we had to do some restructuring within the department itself. We worked in isolation. We did not work as a team, and now I can safely say that we are doing that. We are looking at that school improvement is not just, an issue for one, team up in the department itself, but it is a department issue. But more than that, more importantly, it is a state issue. That any time that we have an underperforming school, that's unacceptable. We are looking at, and again, we'll be rolling out, I expect a strategic plan before the end of the year, presented by Ms. Johnson. We'll provide that to you as a committee as well. So, we're looking, to do this. Again, as I shared, looking at a lot of the initial things we're finding here, those areas that are on the outside of the base, the fringe, areas, then definitely I think we can identify those. And that's why I think seeing all these schools, I think, looking at Richmond County, trying to see if we have some.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
And identifying the schools. I think we've already done that, both from the failing perspective. I think it was like 21. That number could have changed by now, but also the location. So I don't think we have problems identifying those schools. I guess my question got more with this focus on the military, which we're doing here. Counselors and all these other things that we talked about. Is there anything for these particular schools within this radius, or are we just throwing them all into the, the 21?
Yeah. No, sir. I think that, again, as I looked at, our strategic plan as far as, putting this together, again, this is relatively new. So, it is my plan to identify these schools. And again, we can, bear more resources. Again, providing these schools, with additional counselors, having an individual who can manage this. Again, we do not have someone, specifically at the department right now that is identified for military schools specifically. Now, that is, again, with this position that we're talking about, this individual would be able to focus on that. And again, again, to your concern of those outlying schools, then that would be under that individual's preview. So we would have, a person who is specifically designed to reach out to military influence or military schools that have a high percentage of population. So that would allow us to better identify, but also better to meet the resources and know what those resources are. I think having an individual that has direct contact with that school level principal, then it would allow them to bring in resources, again, profit, nonprofit, again, business partners, but also to make us aware of what's out there. So those are things that I think with that individual and a request that if we're able to put this person in place, then we would meet those needs that I think that you're expressing at this time.
And I agree, the Superintendent, that I think part of the effort of this committee is to put more resources to these military schools. That's
Exactly.
the whole point.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. I understand the resources that are going to be going towards these failing schools. Got it.
Sure.
However, these schools that we're talking about, this committee,
Yes.
that hosts a lot of military families.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on top of that, this is sort of kind of what I'm. So
Yeah. Well, there again, I think that the position of this new manager position does that. It addresses, I think, the concerns where we have a person whose sole purpose is to focus on military-related families and support. I mean, that is their job. Now, again, we don't have that person as of yet, but that's why I'm making the recommendation to put this person in place. Because, again, supporting the families, identifying, working with these schools, then you allow that person to give us information, to have somebody who is a direct contact, not with the broad 2,000-something schools, but schools that are definitely have a high military population.
Okay, very quickly, Mr. Representative Williams, then we'll move on.
Let me say this, and I hate to belabor, but I've seen the list, and there's nothing more important in this testimony this morning
Yes, sir.
and today than education. It's the biggest piece we have here because it's substantive and it has everything to do with how a person feels when they're coming to a post or when they're leaving.
Yes, sir.
There's nothing else in here more important. So I need to make this clear.
Sure.
And most of us don't understand this. On the post, the state of Georgia has no say. That's Department of Defense. We have no control over what happens to education in the actual post area. And there are only 20% of our troops that live on a post, and they're the only ones eligible to go to school on post, and it's elementary education only. They come off to go to high school. So we need to be very plain with the fact that DOD, who will be very polite to the locals, but the state and local government has no say inside the post. But the failing schools out there, and thank you for your initiative to get someone, we're about 40 years late because we've never done anything specific to educating our military students and looking at that is a major reason as to whether you keep a post or lose it. If you're failing educationally, you can get in trouble. But even though we're late, it's better late than never. And thank you for your initiative because there's nothing we'll do here today that's more important than how education relates to our posts.
excuse me, Chairman, before you start, I just want to correct Representative Williams there. In Fort Gordon, our school system is a little different. It's not a DOD school. It's on the base, but it's not a DOD school. It is run by the Richmond County Board of Education. The post is just the host for that. So, and it goes from elementary now. I think they expanded to middle school now. So that's just FYI.
They've just kind of done it with a couple of tests.
Yeah.
But that's a rule, and that's never changed at Fort Stewart.
Yes, sir.
At the gate, leave your state credentials out.
Well, thank you. And we did, again, put about $2 million into these counselors for this position and for this purpose. The reason why we started with the state superintendent, because in my opinion, K-12 education is the most important thing we need to do to get this, to keep these bases. So I do appreciate your gentleman's comments. And I hope you will help me, Representative Williams and Representative Prince, to get more money for these schools and for these counselors. This program we have right now, to me, is a pilot program, and I think we need to expand it. And so that's what I hope that this committee can do. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it. And again, I would just close with this, to indulge me just a second. Roughly we talk about failing schools in the state of Georgia, but I want to assure you that, there are over 90% of our schools that are not on a list. These schools are getting better. And as I shared with Stephanie Johnson, there is not a better person in the state of Georgia. And our commitment is to make sure that we have no schools on this list, and especially for military families. That is my commitment. And so, I think that with this and the proposals that we'll have here, it will definitely address these needs. And I think for those folks in Washington, they can see that we will be performing and we will do the job that we need to do. So thank you very much.
And thank you, State Superintendent, because I want to, again, reiterate, our graduation rate is now 81%. That's a 10% rise in 5 years. The SAT is the best it's been in decades. And the ACT is the best it's been in decades. So we are actually we're at a high water mark, and we're moving even better. So I think we've got a really good education story to tell when we go to DC. And I appreciate the fact that the Department of Education, and mostly our teachers, have been doing for that. The next thing we'll do is General Gerard from the Georgia National Guard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First of all, I'll just echo on the education piece. If you don't know, that less than 3 in 10 18 to 26-year-olds even qualify for military service. And the reason they don't qualify is because of education, 1, obesity, 2, and then they're in trouble with the law is 3. And so can't reiterate enough, we got to educate our youth so they can qualify to serve. I'll first of all just talk real quickly about the guardsmen that are mobilized. We've got about 200 guardsmen that are mobilized. For the first time ever, our cyber protection team is mobilized. Pretty interesting, in my opinion. They didn't go overseas. They went to Fort Meade, and they're up there prosecuting the fight through the internet from Fort Meade. And they're doing some very cool stuff getting after the bad guys. We've got about 60 Army Guardsmen that are with 3ID's headquarters that are downrange. They thicken that staff, and so they're getting after it. And then we've got 26 individuals that are part of a theater engagement team that are soldiers that are downrange at numerous embassies in the CENTCOM area of operation. Additionally, on the air side, we've got our JSTARS team is constantly mobilized. They've been overhead in CENTCOM's area since the war started. And then we've got about 120 of our C-130 wing from Savannah that are mobilizing in November to go downrange. The biggest unit mobilization we've had in a while will take place about a year from now. The 48th is on the hook to mobilize. We think that's going to be about 4,000 soldiers, and they are planned to go to Afghanistan at this time. So that's kind of what we're seeing. For those of you that are not aware, the Air Force leadership here in the past month has decided that they do not want to recapitalize JSTARS. And recapitalize JSTARS means develop a new plane and a new radar to do that mission. And up until about 6-8 weeks ago, the Air Force had been working with our congressional delegation to include language in the budget to recapitalize that platform. And then here at the 11th hour have decided they think that they don't want to. The Secretary of the Air Force will receive a briefing before the end of this month, supposedly, on whether they will try to take it out of the FY19 budget. Senator Isaacson's Purdue, along with Representative Scott, are working hard to ensure that the money stays in this year's NDAA. I think just this morning the Senate announced the conferees from the Senate Armed Service Committee, and Senator Purdue will sit in as one of the conferees, and then Representative Scott is also in the conference committee from the House side, and so they're going to work to ensure that language stays in this year for recapitalization of JSTARS. We'll work on FY19's NDAA, I guess, when the time comes. And I know we've got our Warner Robins team here with us this morning, and so that's near and dear to our heart with respect to what happens with JSTARS. I will tell you, just came back from Association United States Army Annual Conference last week in D.C. General Milley and General Abrams both General Milley spent about 3 hours with the adjutant generals last Wednesday afternoon. It was a good session. As all of you are aware, North Korea is an issue, and General Milley thinks we're talking in terms of months instead of years with respect to something happening. He said war is not imminent. The diplomacy has been ratcheted up significantly, and his words, I don't like China, but I'm their biggest fan right now because I think that they're the only ones that can help us get through this issue. But having said that, the Army has had numerous mobilization stations throughout the United States when the war was in high hover. That has been reduced to Fort Hood and Fort Bliss at this time. Tomorrow at Fort Bragg, FORSCOM headquarters, they're going to do a tabletop exercise to look at 9 mobilization stations throughout the United States. Good news for Georgia is that Fort Stewart's going to be one of those. And so they're going to work on, don't know if they're ever going to have to stand it up or not, but we're going to be postured to stand it up. And obviously the 600 acres that the Georgia Guard owns down there at Fort Stewart will play a big role in that. But that would be a good benefit to the state of Georgia if we do start mobilizing soldiers out of Fort Stewart. So the thing I guess I will tell you this morning is every state around the state of Georgia, all of our neighbor states provide free college education to National Guardsmen. It ranges anywhere from $2 million to $9 million, depending on which state you look at and how much they spend. We've been working with the governor's office, and we think that $3 million will do that for the state of Georgia. And we've developing some policy. What we want to do is piggyback off the Service Council Loan Program that we already have in place, but we want to tweak the language a little bit. We want to include in there that from the last semester they use funding that they serve 2 additional years in the Georgia Guard so that we get a benefit from that. We want to also expand it to include graduate degrees and so forth. Mr. Joe Ferrero has been working with the governor's office on that. They said we can mention it to you and let you know that we're working with them, and we haven't finalized anything yet, but we will be asking for that this year because it's going to impact our recruiting and ability. If you live within 50 miles of the Florida line, why join the Georgia Guard? Why not join the Florida Guard and go to school for free? And so that's something that we're looking at and would appreciate your assistance with. And then the last thing I'll just mention, our Youth Challenge Academy. I've got Representative Prince and Representative Williams sitting over there, and we've got our Milledgeville campus up and running. Just graduated their 2nd class as well. And the governor actually Miss Deal spoke at the graduation. The governor went down with her, but can't say enough about getting after education and giving some of our youth a second chance. And we're helping lives and making a difference in their lives. So. With that, I'll stop and ask or answer any questions if anybody's got any.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, General. I appreciate you mentioning my favorite program, the Youth Challenge. And you opened with talking about how only 3 of 10,
less than 3 of 10,
less than 3 qualify because of the 3 factors. Youth Challenge directly addresses each one of these. No doubt the vast majority of Youth Challenge participants would be in some serious trouble or enough trouble to keep them out of the military had it not been for them going through the program. And certainly last year, for the first time in some time, the 17% pay raise certainly appreciated, because a lot of people were working out there just because they feel committed, and we're at least beginning to reach the point where we're thanking them through pay.
And
Thank you for your work.
I can't thank y'all enough for that, because they very much deserve it, and I'm glad to finally get that kicked in.
General, while you're up there, I just wanted to make a very short summary of what's been going on lately to the committee. Just yesterday, the Secretary Mattis put out a statement that, again, they do want a BRAC. This is yesterday. And that they said that there's 19% too much capacity in the DOD, most of it in the Army and the Air Force. I think there's about 30% in the Army and 33% in the Air Force. Senator McCain has talked a lot about BRAC in support. Senator Reed on the Democrat side has also done that in the Senate. Chairman Thornberry on the House of Representatives, he's been against it in general. But there's a lot of support on the Senate side for doing a BRAC, and certainly the DoD wants it, and even the President has talked about wanting to do one. So, and if you look in your package of stuff, there's a piece of paper here that says force structure. It's just a one piece of paper. It's not out there, but basically, this came directly from the Department of Defense just yesterday, talking about the fact that we're going to have a lot less strength level in a lot of areas. Almost every column you see here, the fiscal year 19 unit number is less than the fiscal year 12. So even though we're putting slightly more money into the Department of Defense, it's actually, we're getting smaller even as we speak. And in your congressional package, it's still the case where GDP on military spending is still only 3%. Back in the Reagan days, it was 6%. In the Trump and the Bush days, Obama days, it was about 4%. It's down to 3%. So there's very little money out there to be spent on the military. That's why it's so vitally important that we fight hard for the Georgia money. Is that correct, General?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I'll from the Guard perspective, I will tell you that on the Army side, the National Guard Bureau rank ordered all the states and looked at states that we're authorized about 10,000 Army Guardsmen. We have on the books 11,000. The reason we're allowed to overdrive is because we can, and we do. And so there are states that can't meet their end strength. And at the end of every fiscal year, the Army Guard wants to have the 353,000 on the books that the Army allows them to have, and if they don't, then the Army would say, well, we need to reduce the amount you have. Because some states can't meet their end strength, they allow Georgia to overdrive, so it balances Army National Guard's books at the end of every year. And so we're, not only do we overdrive by 1,000, but we make those 1,000 ready. And so we've got ready forces, and so we are looking to increase our force structure in the Army Guard here in the state of Georgia. So I just share that with you to show that your Georgia Guard is vibrant and strong and looking to grow, not reduce.
And to Representative Williams' point as well, Georgia is the second highest military participation rate of any state, second highest, only second to Florida, and our participation rate is double the national average. So the program you're doing, General, is obviously helping a lot. We have a lot of good Georgian young men and women joining the military, and one of the reasons I think is because you have such a successful Guard.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions for General Girard?
Just, I don't know who you're meeting with next week in the Pentagon, but if I can be of any assistance there, please let me know.
Yes, sir. I sure will.
Right.
And we are going to work on that that money for the education. Yeah,
Okay.
and I hope you'll let me carry that bill because I'd like to do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Okay, next up is going to be Commissioner Mike Roby of Veterans Affairs. Sure appreciate him coming today. And it's amazing. It's a $5 billion that the Veterans Affairs brings to Georgia every year. $5 billion. That's a lot of money. And we have 750,000 veterans in Georgia, one of the very highest in the nation. Commissioner Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. With me today, part of the briefing will be Assistant Commissioner Dan Holtz, Assistant Commissioner George Canavaggio, and Mr. Mark Bannister, who serves as our Operations Director. With us also today, here she is, she's in the back, is Miss Trish Ross, who is one of our board members, and we're honored to have her with us today. Gentlemen, in front of you, you've got a lengthy summary there. We will try to go through this as quick as we can. It is an honor for us to be with you today, and first and foremost, we want to thank each of you for what you do every day for our veterans here in Georgia. As you can see on page number 5, as the chairman mentioned, we have approximately 700,000 veterans here in Georgia, and we provide the best service that we know how to our veterans and their dependents. Georgia continuously ranks among the top states in securing our benefits for our veterans. As you can see on page number 6, there are 8 other states that have a higher veteran population than we do here in Georgia. But if you flip to the next page, you will see that Georgia ranks number 5 in the United States when it comes to benefits and what is brought in. And as the chairman said, we're very proud in this department. As you can see the footnote on the right-hand side there, according to Mr. Albuquerque, who's the director of the Atlanta VA Regional Office, 70% of the claims that come through the regional office come from the Georgia Department of Veteran Service, and that equates to $2.4 billion that's generated by the department. And we're very proud on that. On page number 8, we broke down our missions for you, the Georgia Department of Veteran Service missions. And I'm going to Assistant Commissioner George Canavaggio come up and talk to you on benefits. He is the Assistant Commissioner for the field operations in our appeals division. George?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Georgia Department of Veteran Service has 52 field offices spread throughout the state. The department's field officers provide personal assistance to veterans and their families in all matters pertaining to veterans' benefits. The department employs certified officers to deliver expert advice, counseling, and assistance to help veterans in their application process for federal and state benefits. It also includes the veterans, their families are encouraged to visit our field offices in order to get assistance in filing for their benefits. If in case the benefits aren't awarded to the satisfaction of the veterans, we do have an appeal division located at the regional office in Atlanta. The appeals division assists veterans and their families to choose to dispute the disposition of their claims for benefits. These appeals, our department is steadily increasing the number of appeals being delivered to the Board of Veterans Appeals. This year, hearings conducted through September 30th of this year is 3,718 hearings. Last year, total in 2016 was 4,920, and as you can see, all the way down to 2014, we've conducted 1,516. So you can see the number of hearings being increased over the years. Statewide total pending is 40,000 hearings waiting to be heard by the veterans, the Board of Veterans Appeals. And any of our veterans that are represented by our department, our services are provided free of charge. And I guess I'll be followed by Assistant Commissioner Dan Holtz if there aren't any questions.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it's good to be with you this morning. The area of responsibility that I have includes our 2 state veterans homes. On page 16 of the briefing is a picture of what's affectionately known as the Blue Goose over in Augusta. It's our smaller of the 2 homes. It's located right across the street from the Augusta University Medical Center and is actually operated by AU. We have a capacity of 188 veteran patients that we can handle at that facility. Right now, we've got 144 that are currently residing there. The admission criteria for both of our homes is there must be wartime service other than a dishonorable discharge, Georgia residency for the past 2 years, or any 5 years or more in the past 15. And so the criteria for admission, as I say, at both homes is the same. On page 18 is a aerial shot of our home in Milledgeville. It's operated by a contractor, United Veteran Services, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Pruitt Corporation. We've got a capacity down there in Milledgeville of 375, and right now we're operating with 244 veterans that are there. The facility in Milledgeville is a bit unique because it's a large facility. It's on 18 acres of land, co-located with the old Central State Hospital, and has a VA community-based outpatient clinic that is located in the facility, which is serving the Middle Georgia area, Baldwin County, and the surrounding counties. And so it's a centrally located, easy to get to facility. Also, we have 2 veteran cemeteries that we operate. The eligibility criteria for them is a veteran with other than a dishonorable discharge, and the rules established by the VA are the rules that we follow. Retired members of the Reserves and National Guard are also eligible for interment there. Active duty service members who died in line of duty are also eligible. Dependents, normally that would be the veteran's spouse, but if the veteran has a child who's minor or disabled, that child can also be interred with the veteran. The costs, there is no cost once you enter the gate. Graveside, opening and closing, opening of the vault, closing marker, use of the committal chapel at both facilities. We have a chapel there at each of our facilities. There's no cost to the veteran or the family member. There is a cost for anything that occurs prior to coming in to the cemetery, such as the casket, preparation of the body, and other funeral costs. On page 21 is a shot of the chapel at Glenville, which is typical at both of our facilities. The Glenville facility on page 22 was opened in 2007. One of the nice things about our cemeteries is the VA pays 100% of the construction cost. The state doesn't have to put up any of those dollars, although we do have to put up some initial money for design, but then we get those dollars back as part of the VA grant, so it works out nice. Right now there's just under 1,200 veterans and family members that are interred at Glenville, which is on a 42-acre site just north of the city limit. I think Representative Hitchens is very familiar with that facility because it's right next door to his district. We've got in-ground vaults for traditional burials, cremation sites, both columbarium and in-ground, memorial markers for veterans who are not actually interred there or their remains can't be found and the family wants to have some kind of recognition. We provide that service. And also at that facility we have one of our 52 Veteran Field Service offices is located in that administration building. On page 23 is an aerial shot of our ceremonial area at our facility in Milledgeville, which was opened in 2001. Right now we have just a little over 3,100 veterans and family members who were interred at that facility. It's the larger of our 2 facilities, 142 acres. It's located on land that was initially owned by the State Forestry Commission, and again, the capabilities at that particular facility are the same as they are at Glenville. However, the facility at Milledgeville, as you see, is opened in 2001. We are already on our second expansion for our Phase 3, which is now underway, and will provide an additional 15 acres of capability at that location with about a little over 1,500 in-ground burial sites and 320 columbarium sites. So we're going to actually establish a second columbarium down there because the one that we have that's right across the way, if you've been there from the chapel, is just about filled. So that facility is definitely a busy place. If you go over to page 26, I've also got responsibility for our administration of the department, to include the typical services that we provide. Our Returning Veterans Task Force, which is in state law, was implemented about 4.5 years ago. Right now we have 13 state agencies that are members of that task force, and we are the overseer for that operation. We're operating on a budget of, the department is, of just right at about $40 million, both state, federal, and other. The other funds are from the daily fees that are charged to veterans at our 2 state veterans homes, which right now is $23.63 a day. So if you need nursing home care and you're a veteran, pretty good rate. Back to the task force a second. It was established in 2013, coordinate state government activities and services focusing on veterans who are coming to live or work in Georgia, newly separated and retired or newly relocated to the state. And so we try to provide information to them and make sure that the services that are provided by our department, the Department of Labor, the university system, the technical college system, just to name a few, are all coordinated. We all know what's going on with each other, and if somebody's got a better idea how to do something, why we try to play off of each other. Also, if we come up with an issue that we think needs some legislative attention, we provide an annual report to the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker, so that information can be considered by the General Assembly. One of the things that the RVTF did several years ago was to create a video. One shot of that is on page 29, which is a Welcome to Georgia video. It's about 5 minutes long, and it's currently under revision. We're working with the Workforce Division over at the Department of Economic Development to come up with a new and improved version of that video, which we hope to have put out probably within the next 6 months. So, are there any questions on my areas?
Chairman Hitchens?
I don't really have a question. Apparently I don't have a mic either.
I don't really have a question, Colonel Holtz, but I just wanted to let everybody know how responsive you are. The whole agency is responsive to me, but I do all the time with, I live in the military area, particularly for retirees. Fort Stewart, Paris Island, Beaufort Air Station, Naval Hospital, and the Hunter Army Airfield. And a lot of them decide to stay and retire afterwards. And, you know, the only medical facilities available are in Charleston and Dublin and Jacksonville, which are all over 100 miles from the area. And as an example, I just had a guy, about a month ago, right during the hurricane, 94 years old, World War II, Korea, Vietnam veteran, and he got to the point in his life where his 90-year-old wife couldn't take care of him. His daughter was an Air Force nurse who lived at Stone Mountain, and she was down trying to make arrangements to take care of him. And finally, they just decided they couldn't go any further. So right in the middle of the hurricane, I called and we got him into the home up in Augusta. Right. They had to drive him all the way up here with all the traffic, but he got in the next day, and Colonel Holtz facilitated that. And that's just one of the many things he's done for people that require some type of medical attention. And I really appreciate it. I get calls from all over the state all the time, and I've never felt like I was infringing on them. They always welcome it, and I know it's difficult sometimes because we are a state and we're dealing with federal issues many times, and but they have the ability to get into the computer too and facilitate moving forward with the VA. So thank you very much for all that.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Williams.
Thank you, sir. My next question is to make sure that my friend will be able to get into one of those nursing homes. And
I think he meets the criteria, sir.
I think most of us do. But what about, and I see this all the time, so many veterans fall under the radar. They're destitute. Some of them don't qualify for VA pensions because they never got hurt. They just got, for whatever reasons, their bodies fail them, and sometimes from certain abuses. But what happens when a veteran does not even have the $22 a day to get in the nursing home?
There is a waiver provision for that based on the individual's economic status, and if they fall below 1.25% of the consumer price index value, which I think is $16,000 to $17,000 a year for a single veteran, okay? And that's the criteria that we use, because that's the lowest number. If they fall below that, there's a waiver provision. They don't have to pay it. So if they aren't otherwise service-connected disabled at the 70% level, or admitted to the nursing home for the reason that they have a service-connected disability, where they wouldn't have to pay for it anyway because the federal government pays the entire cost of care for those folks at our facilities.
Yeah.
If they don't meet that criteria, there is a waiver provision, and we can go ahead and bring them in. They don't have to pay the fee.
And one follow-up. Thank you all for what you do for the veterans, because you do an outstanding job. One of the problems is it's similar to what happened to those of us that came home from Vietnam. It took almost 40 years for people to acknowledge that we were back. You know, we were just the invisible people. There are a lot of invisible veterans who, unfortunately, does not know one of us, does not have any contacts. They really don't. And the person that was looking for that nursing home bed for a World War II veteran, thank God they knew Representative Hitchens. But a lot of them don't have advocates, and I don't know the effort to find them, because I promise you, and Mr. Robert, I think you'll agree, that this evening when we look under the bridge, half of those people on that bridge are veterans. And it's kind of hard to be seen, not just in Georgia, anywhere in America. If you're not connected, it's tough. Look at what kind of service you gave your country. If you don't know somebody that knows somebody, you are in a mess. I just hope we continue to even step up our efforts to find those that are forgotten.
Thanks, Herb.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mark Bannister to come up and do education and training.
Mr. Williams, before I bring Mark up, just to let you know, there is, for a veteran who has very little or no income, there is a such thing as called a non-service connected pension. And we have a lot of our veterans that are in the homes, they qualify for that pension with aid and attendance. And so that does help out. Just wanted you to know.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mark Bannister, and I am the Director of Operations for the Georgia Department of Veterans Service. The Education and Training Division, also known as the State Approving Agency, is responsible for approving and supervising all Georgia educational institutions and training establishments that offer education and training veterans under the GI Bill. If you'd go out and you'd ask the average veteran or dependent out there, tell me something about the GI Bill, they couldn't tell you. One thing they'd tell you is, hey, I can use that to go to school. What their job is and what their very important mission in the veterans' education is to educate the veterans, educate their dependents, educate the employers, educate training facilities about the GI Bill, because there's much more than just going to school. You can also use for apprenticeship. You can also use the GI Bill for OJT training if you didn't know. You can also use it for other types of certifications People can also, veterans can also, and dependents can also go to non-degree granting schools, such as the Tyndall schools or the CNA schools or type schools like that. So you can use the GI Bill for various things. Currently, there are 1,723 schools and training established approved for the veterans to use their VA educational benefits in Georgia. There are 421 approved schools and 1,302 approved training establishments. Currently, there are more than 22,000 veterans in the state of Georgia that are using their VA education benefits in the state, and 12,000 are using the post 9/11 GI Bill. And sirs, that completes my briefing unless you have any questions. Sir.
Representative Williams?
I hate to keep talking, but my whole
You love it.
but my whole life has been military connected. And I remembered with the education bills, the difference in now and after World War II. As a little boy, I'm a lot younger than Bill Hitchens, but as a little boy, I remember veterans walking by my house. They didn't have cars, to go to high school courses to get their high school degrees. You don't see that now, because everybody got a car, even though, but the key is so many people have a chance or had a chance in this country because they got an education through the VA. And that's one of the most important benefits. And when a person is retired and their children, or they're 70% above, they can get an education. It's really key to help us close that education gap that exists here. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Representative Williams.
And just FYI, Georgia ranks #1 in the OJT program. We have for many, many years, our Education Training Division. I'd like to talk to you real quick about our Public Information Division. And I'm proud to say that we have just hired 2 new folks. One of them is a recent graduate from University of Georgia. And she is going to assist the other 2 in bringing us into the 21st century. In the briefing on slide number 33, it shows that we keep the veterans and public informed of the Georgia Department of Veterans Service news and events, legislative changes, and other permanent information. We publish promotional materials. We have a state handbook that we provide, calendars, flyers. We maintain the website, and of course we have the blog, the Twitter, the Facebook, and that public information also oversees the state's participation in the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War that we partner with DOD. If you turn to page 34, that was the initial kickoff, and you can see Representative Higgins standing right there next to the governor. He was one of the first ones to receive his certificate of honor. So far, we have given out 19,153 certificates since March of 2015, and we've participated in 275 ceremonies. We've given out 15,256 DoD lapel pins, and we have given out the new, it started in January of this year, the Surviving Spouse Certificate of Honor. We've given out 57 of those. Let me add, a week ago today, I had the privilege of going down to Springfield, Georgia, with Representative Hitchens, Senator Jack Hill, and Representative John Burns, and he had a wonderful ceremony, sir. We honored 35 Vietnam veterans from the American Legion post there, and were able to give them their certificate and pins, and it was indeed an honor, sir. And so we thank you for that. On page 36, we show you just some of the ceremonies that we've had. When you partner with DOD, you promise, you sign a memo that you'll have 2 events a year, and this just shows you what we've done so far at the state capitol on that side. If you over, if you would, to page 38. It shows you some of our visions. As you can tell, and a lot of you in this room were instrumental in making that happen, and we want to thank you so much. Field service offices, it's still pending. Expansion in our areas that we need them in the high density, that's still pending. We did, thanks to you all here, we're able to get a women's coordinator, and we've done that, and she is, she's on the move. She is very, very busy right now. Also, with the expansion of the subacute therapy unit there at Milledgeville, that's underway as we speak. If you'll go to page 40, we just want to, some legislative to promote Georgia's veterans friendly, eliminate income tax for military retiree compensation, attract military retirees to remain or come to Georgia, income and spending in Georgia economy, local and state sales and property taxes paid, business tax deduction for hiring veterans. We encourage our businesses to hire veterans. We move on to the license plates, as you can see. Licensing, I'm sorry, for our military personnel and their family members. It just goes on from 42, and we just want to tell you that we thank you again for all that you do. We're here to serve our veterans. I'm blessed to have a great team, and we work very hard taking care of our veterans here in Georgia, and we want to thank y'all for that, and we'll answer any questions at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate, and I just wanted to, you know, obviously this is the Veterans Affairs Chairman right here, Bill Hitchens.
Yes, sir.
That's why I just wanted the committee and also the folks from the USG and TSG to understand what y'all do. And I hope you'll stay. We have put together a Georgia military-friendly guide, and I think you'll find that actually Representative Williams started a lot of reciprocity laws concerning licensures. And I think
Yes,
if there's any licensures we're not doing, I hope you'll tell us, because we think we've got a lot of them out, and possibly, I'm sure there's a stray license we haven't gotten, but we've been very, very expeditious, especially with Representative Williams starting the process of trying to make sure we correct that.
Yes, sir.
Any questions for the Commissioner? Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.
Driver's license will get you a 10% discount at Lowe's too.
There you go, sir.
Home Depot also.
All right, next we'll have Colonel Gary Jones from the Georgia Chamber Rural Prosperity Defense Community. And I'm very excited about this community group getting together, because it's a symbol that the Chamber understands the financial impact that the military puts on Georgia. By my reckoning, it's the third or fourth largest economy in Georgia is the military, which is hard to believe. Obviously, agriculture is first. Number two is tourism, but right after that is the military. It's a $25 billion impact. Colonel Jones.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I thank you for this opportunity to be here. I'm somewhat apprehensive of coming before the committee, but even more importantly to me right now, I realize tomorrow I'll see Representative Smyrie, and Dean Smyrie will let me know whether I got to go or no go today. So, but on behalf of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, I thank you for this opportunity. We have several representatives here from various bases. We have, and if you'd please stand, we have the Georgia Chamber of Commerce represented here, which is Morgan Law. We have Fort Gordon is represented here. Robbins Air Force Base is represented here. Dobbins Air Reserve Base, and I'm here to represent Fort Benning. Thank you all for coming in today. Upon the invitation of this committee to come before it, what we really wanted to do is we really wanted to focus with the Defense Committee of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, what we're doing, and to provide you an update on our efforts and our action plan. And I'm very, very pleased that as it evolved, this action plan is in direct in sync with the focus and the direction this committee is going. We've all heard about different things and the potential steps that take place, and we've heard about BRAC and sequestration and drawdowns, but we focus it under one term, defense transformation. And that's been able to give us flexibility in what we address, because there's a lot of changes taking place, and that's being driven by the international community at large. The military, a great deal of it now, you see the realities of facilities, excess facilities. The chairman addressed this in part today. The Department of Defense recently came out with a report, as in it was released, I believe, yesterday. And what they did differently is they didn't compare it against the force of 2019 that was getting smaller. They compared it against the force of 2012 that was directed by Congress. And that force is larger. So as a result, that we found out that excesses changed somewhat. For instance, the Army went from about 33% excess to 29%. The Air Force went to 28%, but there are a couple of really unique things about that. The Air Guard, at that point, actually went from 24 excess to 0 when you looked at the size of the force. In addition to that, from the Air Force, the excess parking ramp space went from 7, it actually increased to 15. This should present a note of concern to this committee and to the community supporting that, because now all of a sudden the Air Force ramp space excess is being increased. Department of Logistics was 13%, and the Marine Corps specifically actually went from 27% to 19th, which bodes well for the Marine Corps logistics base. Now these excesses are in fact requiring Department of Defense to have to use dollars that were to be spent on readiness, mobilization, and updating of equipment, to be using that basically on homekeeping, on housekeeping. Now our approach has been that what can we do to best support the state and to best support the installation? Now we're also addressing the issue of BRAC. That's a 4-letter word, and for some it'll be good, for some it won't be good. But what we're finding out is that many people say, well, a BRAC is in FY21. Why are you in such a rush, especially from the Georgia Chamber perspective, when you've got 4 years? That's very, very misleading, because once you understand Department of Defense, you'll realize that beginning in October of 2018, that Department of Defense begins what's referred to as data calls. They start getting information. Where are you, Robbins? Where are you, Benning? Where are you, Stewart? Where are you, Gordon? October 18 is next year. So for those that think that we've got 4 years to prepare for a BRAC, we've got about a year to make sure where you're in the best stead. Now, when we look at Georgia, Georgia has some really strong thresholds out there. And from a BRAC perspective of closure, in my opinion, which I'll assure you means absolutely nothing, but I'm giving it in this state, is that you'll have roles like Fort Gordon in this role with cybersecurity. You don't have to worry about Fort Gordon. You look at Kings Bay with the Navy's #1 priority being the submarine fleet. You don't have to worry about Kings Bay. When you look at Fort Stewart, and it's got the 18th Airborne Corps, quick reaction heavy force to go worldwide, you don't have to really worry about Stewart. And Benning, you've got the infantry and the armor schools, and it's also the combined arms tactical intellectual think tank for the Army on how we're going to fight the next war. But what you do have to worry about is the fact that even though these are very stable installations, they can still be impacted by downsizing. They can be, and you can actually lose portions of that. Now, do you have other installations in the state that I submit to you that the state of Georgia and our elected leadership in Washington, that we need to be taking this time to grow more and more strategic alliances with areas such as Dobbins, you get to Robbins, you get to Moody, and those bases that you go and you try to establish strategic relationships, especially with Department of States. When you look down at the air base right outside of Valdosta, they're training other nations on certain aircraft. Anytime you can get the Department of State involved with a military installation, that will bode well for stability in that case. And so while we're talking about BRAC, we're actually seeing a sense of growth occur in the military. But people are still forgetting this thing called sequestration. Sequestration has not gone away. In fact, sequestration officially is to start this month. Again, it was delayed. Now this is going on at a time that we're going and we're seeing our forces grow and start to increase based on guidance coming now from the administration in Washington. But please use this opportunity to, during your visit to Washington, to reinforce the need that we need sequestration to go away. And there's got to be some give and take on both sides of the aisle on that, but sequestration was never supposed to happen. It was supposed to be so horrific and so horrible that it would never be, in fact, implemented, but unfortunately it was. Now, is the Georgia Chamber's approach, anytime you present a problem or a problematic issue, they say, okay, what's the answer to that? And as a result is, we came up with what we believe is a strong action plan, and many of these already dovetailed exactly what you're doing. First of all, treat the military, treat defense as economic development, because it is a classic economic development instrument. The next thing we ask is you make sure as you work the funding process, the governor's defense initiative is a phenomenally effective program focused on economic development. Please support that. We need to ensure that this committee becomes permanent. It doesn't need to come and go, especially now at this threshold and the challenges we're facing in the future. We also need to, I ask, that this committee consider the creation of a Georgia House of Representatives Defense Caucus. I also ask that at the same time you communicate to your friends in the Senate and ask for a Senate Defense Caucus. And if the world were perfect, wouldn't it be absolutely fantastic to have a joint Senate and House Defense Caucus? But I submit to you that this will bring together those that are focused on defense and the issues impacting the defense, where that number then involved would be far greater even than this committee's number would have there. We ask that Georgia allow for defense communities to apply, compete for its defense program. You have a defense communities program you put in effect that people can go, the communities and regions can ask for support to conduct a joint land use study, to do a strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats study. But now the next step is we need to get some funding into the program. We've got the program, but now we need to try to get some funds in there, and we need it to be multiple year funding. We need to support that because the regions around a military base need to conduct a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats focused on mission growth. Now, that is an ideal target for that community 21st century partnership to apply. You go out there to get the Fort Gordon Alliance, to these entities, the Valley Partnership, and so forth, and on, could apply for this to get support to do this strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat. But even more importantly, we submit to you that the state of Georgia needs a macro strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats focused on defense itself. The results of that then will provide the basis if it needs to go in and update its current existing defense strategy that exists there. But you don't need to have the communities and regions doing a strength, weakness, opportunity, threat if they don't know the impact and the support from the state. This one is a challenge, but I'd like to present you a potential solution. You've already heard it from the Veterans Administration. You've heard it from many places. They can say Georgia hurts itself economically because we go and we tax the military retiree pay. Now that's a lot of money out there. So I submit to you for your consideration that we approach it incrementally. Let's go in the next session and say, okay, we will do that for those on 2018. Nobody else we're touching. We're just focused on those veterans that are retired in 2018. And then the years after that, you start backing up. Well, once you get to be, this gray hair I have is not premature, so I'm in that category already. I'm receiving the benefits of my age from being here in the state of Georgia. And you could start working backwards 1 year at a time till you get in that category. But I think it would be a great step forward, and it may be a very clear message if you could start even with 2018 for those retirees, because I'll tell you, that young man, that young woman that's retiring from the military have a lot of years of productivity, and especially in the border communities and counties, you will see that when you look at Alabama and others when it comes to state income tax. They'll come work in our state, but they will live in another state. Another is that in our group, we're focusing on the go, no go. And we're doing that for Department of Defense's top 10 priorities that are military friendly. Those 10 items are constantly changing, and you need to be tracking what those items are, and you've done a great job. And this isn't a play word, you've done a great job already implementing legislation to get us from amber areas up to green is to go in the 10 things that are most important. We agree that professional certification and licensing needs more effort. We're seeing some very positive things occur in hospital hiring for the military, but not so much for their spouses. And we all see some great challenges in engineering, teacher certification and so forth, as far as certification and licensing remain a challenge. And last but not least, we strongly encourage the creation of a Georgia Military Affairs Commission, not a Georgia Military Affairs Committee. And the reason I submit this is a commission can receive funds from federal or state. A committee cannot. So all of a sudden you have a Georgia Military Affairs Commission, and that becomes an entity that's recognized as a state entity that you can go and work and address issues, and you're speaking from a position there. We even went as far as to say we'd see that suggested composition of that actually have the governor obviously being the chair, the governor having 3 appointees, the Senate having 3, the House having 3, the Georgia Department of Defense have 1, and each entity that's supporting their base for Dobbins, from Benning, from Gordon, from Stewart, Hunter, the Georgia Department of Defense or National Guard, Kings Base Submarine Base, Marine Corps Logistics Base, Albany, Moody, and Robbins. Each one of those have a place on that commission, and that way you have the voice of all. In conclusion, we have an opportunity to impact the quality of life of Georgia's citizens and to help our men and women in uniform. We owe nothing less to that, to the support that effort here in this state and to this great nation. And pending your questions, I thank you for the opportunity to have spoken.
Thank you, Colonel. Chairman Spirey?
Mr. Jones, you've done an absolute excellent job. Gary.
Do I consider that a go, sir?
That's
It took less trauma for tomorrow.
You passed go. You got your foot on the pedal.
Thank you, sir.
And you have given, I think, this committee some good traction. And I am ecstatic about the Chamber of Commerce and this House of Representatives in terms of what we've done and what we were trying to accomplish. I just shared with Representative Williams and Representative Clark my sentiment that every time I tell people, I had a group in Columbus I met with because of the 100th celebration
anniversary
of Fort Benning,
yes,
100 years old, in which you were at. But after that, I met with a group of constituents, and I talked about this committee. They were shocked. They did not know collectively that in Georgia, these military installations represent over $20 billion annually from economic impact.
Yes, sir.
The public doesn't know it. They know Fort Benning, Fort Benning. They know Fort Stewart, Fort Stewart. They know Fort Gordon, Fort Gordon. But when you put it collectively, and that's what we have not done. We have not galvanized. We have not told the story appropriately because we do it with a standalone kind of mentality. But if we can merge all of this together, and I think going to Washington is a great step for this House of Representatives, in my opinion, because when you show up, sometimes they do better. And once you get in a plane and go to Washington and talk, and things get better. But I just wanted to tell you that, and the recommendations I hope this committee will take into heed, because this ought to be a collective model.
Yes, sir.
We're talking about the ripple effect of it, and the domino effect is astronomical when you start agriculture, tourism, military base. I mean, the chamber ought to be just clamoring on this, and I'm just so thrilled with you and Chris Clark and the initiative that you all got, and have the other representatives here from the other areas, and I applaud the Georgia Chamber of Commerce because to me they have been in the forefront of this activity. Now, those of us who make public policy, and public policy determines how people live every day.
Yes, sir.
And the only people that set public policy are elected officials. And public policy determines how the quality of life we have in our state. So I want to commend you, and I want to ask you one request, if the chairman would indulge me. I'd like for you to get us to Kathy McMars Rogers.
Yes, sir.
She's the third-ranking Republican in the Congress. She's the #1 ranking female in the Congress. She's co-chair of the Military Family Caucus in the Congress, and I met her through Congressman Sanford Bishop, who happens to be the co-chair of the Military Family Caucus in the House. And I was just enlightened by her breadth of knowledge about military families, and I remember when she served in the Washington House, state legislator. So I'd like for Chairman Belton to, you know, if we could, I don't know whether she's on our agenda or not, but she is a person to know. When you start talking about military families, she's a person to know, Congresswoman Mars Rogers. So I just want to thank you for your comments, and I've taken a lot of notes here, and I'm really impressed with your presentation. I wish I just had it so I could just read it and just digest it. And I want to thank the chamber and all of the other bases that are represented here that work with this chamber. We met with them, I think, after that you arranged after down at the chamber.
Yes, sir.
In Macon. And to me, I think that's a good started relationship. I'm excited. I represent Fort Benning. I represent for 43 years in this house. And I'm excited about it, and I almost represent half of their life, because they ain't but 100. And I've been here 43 years with them, so I'm not 100, but I ain't been around that long. But I've been around almost half. I might just make it halfway. You know what I mean? But I'm excited about this. I'm excited about General Wesley, our commander in general, and I'm excited about going to Washington. I just regret I only be there one day because of the Fountain City Classic, as you know, is in Columbus that same week.
Yes, sir.
But I'm gonna leave them for a day because I appreciate what Chairman Belton is doing and what this committee is doing. Is committed, and we are committed without having the full throttle. We are a working group. But what you're talking about is elevation. And that's what we ought to be talking about. The third largest economy in the state of Georgia? Why do we have to back up on that? That's nothing to back up on. That's something we ought to be putting the foot to the pedal on. And the people that are in the economic powers and the economic drivers of the state ought to be told that. And we're the people to tell them.
Yes, sir.
And I feel strongly about this. $20 to $25 billion a year ought to be talked about and ought to be recognized. Agriculture, tourism, military bases. That's the song. All we got to do is write the words.
Thank you, Chairman. I completely agree with everything you said there, and that's why we're doing this. That's why we're having such a big committee meeting. That's why we're meeting with the chamber and all university folks. This needs to be a big discussion. It needs to be a big song that we're singing. Representative Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really didn't enjoy your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Now, listen, it was fantastic. I was messing with my dean, but I appreciate all the information you shared. This summer, Chris Clark in the chamber met at the King and Prince, and I was on a panel. And at that time, I challenged the chamber because I've never seen a presentation from the Economic Development Group or the chamber that recognizes the economic clout of the military. I said, every time I see an economic development, they go down the list, boom, 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 because I promise you, if you live 50 miles from a military post, it never crosses your mind. The military is not in the thought wave of those who don't live near a post. And that has to change. And it has to change in all of our presentations. When we go out and talk about economic development, you never see number 3, military, because we take for granted. It's always been here. It's federal money. We don't blah, blah. We don't. In Savannah, and we love the port. Port is strong. We love it to death. But stand at Walmart or Kroger and find out who's walking in the door and where they got their check from. A whole lot more of them got them from the military than got them from the port. That's money you get to spend and see. It's not scattered all over the state. It's in your communities. Just wish you all would make sure. And the most important thing in the world to me is to get us back our designation. It is not law, but the Army does not count deployed troops during the census. It cost us $18,000 a person when we didn't get one counted in Liberty County. $18,000. The Navy does it. Air Force does it. We don't. $18,000 a person didn't get counted. That's real money.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes,
might
sir.
add one point. Everything that I've tried to cover today is tied around one word, teaming. Teaming of the Georgia Chamber, the communities in this body. Georgia has an opportunity now with what is faced to go and we make sure that we've created a synergistic approach that's focused from the defense perspective. I submit to you the creation of this Georgia Military Affairs Commission could provide that, and it would preclude the creation of 8 Alamos because the regions are going to make sure their bases are taken care of. But if you could get the synergistic effect of a centralized entity to coordinate and focus with, that would be of huge value. When you look at people here You look at Robbins, you look at Gordon, you look at Dobbins, you're representing billions, not millions, billions of dollars and tens of thousands of people. So we thank you for the opportunity we've had to come forward to update this committee.
Well, thank you, Colonel, and I will tell you that I am working towards those, especially the caucus and the commission idea that that's certainly forefront of my mind to get that accomplished.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Colonel Jones? Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir.
We're going to talk to Colonel Trish Ross of Vector. Really exciting things that's going down Robbins Air Force Base. How you doing, Colonel?
Thank you very much. It is definitely my honor to be here today, and hopefully you'll hear about the synergistic efforts that's going on in the center of the state. And I say synergistic and talking about Gary's comments just now. This is a teaming effort. And so when I last spoke to you about the Georgia Veterans Education Career Transition Resource Center, or Georgia Vector Center, we had just opened. We've now been open 14 months. And I will tell you, exciting things are happening in this state. All that you've talked about so far this morning are happening for our state's veterans and their families. So I want to thank you, Chairman. I want to thank this committee for your vision, your passion in creating the Vector Center, for supporting it over the last not just 14 months, but the last couple of years, in getting it through the General Assembly, for our governor, for our state, in creating this one-of-a-kind entity that exists nowhere else in the nation. So I will tell you, we've had 2 other states come and visit us. We've had the state of Tennessee and we've had the state of Kentucky come to the Vector Center to try and see about replicating our model. The state of Kentucky, in fact, is coming back the same time you're in Washington, D.C., to see about doing the same thing this next fiscal year. We're in talks with North Carolina, and we're in talks with Alabama about doing the same thing. So what exactly are we doing? So we do a few things in the Vector Center. As you may remember, we are the gateway, the academic gateway into Georgia's institutions of higher education. So all of the university system schools and the technical college system schools, we help them get their education and training here within the state of Georgia. More than that, our second mission is workforce development. We have accelerated training programs at the Vector Center. And when I say accelerated training, I truly mean accelerated training. We take 18-month programs that are on the governor's high demand career initiative list and do them in 15 weeks. So Cisco networking that takes 18 months, they do in 15 weeks, get ready to take that Cisco networking exam, walk out making good money, $40,000 to $50,000 walking out the door. We take welding, so your basic welding skills that get them in at a much higher rate are getting that done in 15 weeks. In the spring, we'll start HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Now, the governor, the first program he put in there was CDL to help our logistics infrastructure. We have now graduated 14 classes from the Vector Center. That's all through the technical college system and Central Georgia Tech. We are always looking to grow more programs. Right now, we're just space constrained. So in a year, we've already outgrown what our vocational and technical program space is. That's not a bad problem to have. The third piece that we do is we connect to community resources. So we found initially upon opening that our veterans have a whole lot more challenges than just finding where to go to school, finding a job, or getting into an accelerated program. They've got some very basic needs that need to be met. They are living under bridges. They do need stabilized housing. They need emergency food. They need health care. And so we've partnered with agencies like the United Way and their Mission United program. And while we're not a social service agency, we have partner agencies that are. And so we help meet those basic needs through those other organizations, and that's throughout this state. I'll give you a great example. This was a call yesterday, an 84-year-old veteran, Korean War veteran, Vietnam era veteran, had his electricity turned off. Hadn't had electricity for over 60 days, had a family member that had taken all of his money, wasn't able to pay his electricity bill, called us. Wasn't able to get us his DD-214 so we could get a partner agency to help pay his bill. We needed to engage with Georgia Power. We contacted law enforcement in the area who were able to go out to his home, get a copy of that information, send it to us. We engaged, and now he's going to get his power turned on. So we can do that remotely. You don't have to physically come to the center of the state to get that to happen. I'll give you another story. This is a great example about how all of our partner agencies work together. So we have several state agencies under one roof. We are a one-stop shop. You've already heard from Georgia Department of Veterans Services. You know what they do. We have 2 full-time Veteran Service officers who handle the VA claims. Actually, since this time last year when we relocated them to the Vector Center, they've gone up 10% in the amount of claims they've been able to handle just by virtue of moving location. We have a tremendous throughput through our center. We also have Georgia Department of Labor, who their veteran employment rep works with us to help find our veterans employment, veterans and their family members. We work with our local WorkSource board, who come with education and training dollars so that even when the Hope Career Grant can't necessarily cover more than the tuition, that covers sometimes your equipment, covers sometimes the certification cost. And so all of these people come together, as well as, again, Mission United. Probably the best story. Young lady named Brittany. She actually came from your neck of the woods, was a Fort Stewart Army E4. Separated from the service. She immediately was connected to our resiliency officer. She was struggling, had suffered some trauma while in service, both deployed in a combat zone and at the hands of a fellow soldier. She was a young single mom with 3 kids. We immediately got her to our resiliency officer who triaged the situation. She's got a counseling background. Got her in to see a counselor to help take care of that trauma first and foremost to get her needs met. Got her in to see Georgia Department of Veterans Services to start her VA claim. She needed a job to take care of these young children. Come to find out, she met with one of our success coaches. She had not only a background, but an interest in IT. We got her into our Cisco networking program. She was able to complete that in 15 weeks. But you know, life happens. During that 15 weeks, she struggled with being able to pay for childcare. We then worked with our WorkSource board, who helped fund her childcare costs so she could continue to go to school. So she and the rest of that cohort ended up graduating, and that group now is again making $40,000 to $50,000 now as network administrators here in the state of Georgia. That's just one example. I know many of us have served, and every day I hear, I wish this center was here for us when we got out of the military. My best example of that, we had a city councilman come in our office last Friday with tears in his eyes. His father was in the Vietnam War, and he said his VA benefits came in the day before he passed away. And this councilman had also served over 20 years in the Air Force and struggled when he got out of the service. Because if you think about it, basic training right now, anywhere between 8+ weeks, and then your initial skills training that teaches you how to do your job in the military for your special operators, sometimes it's over a year. We give them a week of training to teach them how to transition to civilian life. A lot of us don't do that well. And he said, I wish this place was here because I would not have struggled. Think of our veterans that end up in veteran treatment court or in worse situations. That's why we exist. That's why you created the Vector Center. And so you can be very proud of the work that you as a committee and the rest of the General Assembly have done. So you've got just a one-page sheet on what we've accomplished in the last 14 months. So on behalf now, as we're approaching 15 months, of the almost 11,000 individuals we've helped, I just wanted to say thank you. Pending your questions.
Well, thank you, Colonel, and I appreciate the governor's vision to create the Vector Center to begin with. I'd like to ask, what can we do to quantifiably help the Vector Center, help to serve more veterans?
We could always grow programs because we've seen a great need. We're partnering to become a career skills program so that your transitioning veterans coming out of our largest installations, which are Stewart, Benning, Gordon, can come to us. We're working with Robins Air Force Base to try and get use of their active duty dorms to be able to house these folks so that they don't have to pay for housing while in Warner Robins, and then can go back to your communities and get viable jobs. So, I mean, helping to get the word out. So I do have very exciting news. So 1 July, the state moved us. We were part of the university system and the technical college system, and the state moved us under the technical college system. They have committed to do a statewide marketing campaign for us that starts in November. And so what that looks like is, in all of your communities, you will start seeing Vector commercials. So that sheet that's in front of you says that about 40% of the people we see come from outside of our 11-county region that surround Warner Robins and Macon. So we're not hitting everybody yet, and we need to, because we need to hit your communities so that they know what we provide. So that marketing campaign will be social media, print, and television. And so I don't think it's letting the cat out of the bag, but if you're a Bulldogs fan and you happen to be watching the Veterans Day game, you should see Vector highlighted in a commercial during that game. So hopefully helping us get the word out that we exist. And when you have your constituents who are struggling and need assistance, we can help connect them to the resources. So that's the biggest thing I need from this committee.
Thank you. Representative Williams?
Believe it or not, Mr. Chairman, I didn't push my button, but I was getting ready to, and then I saw it was pushed. I think Bill just expected me, so he just keeps my light on. Help me understand something about
Yes,
Vector.
sir.
Now, it's in Warner Robins.
Yes, sir.
Now, how do I do the hookup with the huge veterans population I have in Fort Stewart? And I heard the chairman ask the question, how do we help? What about the possibility of 3 or 4 vectors geographically throughout the state? Because it's difficult enough. I have a VA clinic.
Yes,
it's
sir.
tough for some veterans to get from Glenville to Hinesville. They just don't have the means and the sources. So I'm not overly familiar with Vector. I remember we talked about it when we went to Warner Robins. It's fantastic, great building, and I love it. But tell me about accessibility.
Yeah, we can still help your constituents remotely. I'm not saying it's completely off the table to expand. Our services that we do and how we connect resources in a one-stop shop can be done in communities around the state. Of course, it's up to y'all and the governor as to whether you want to invest the resources to create another facility like ours. It is a large investment by the state, but there are existing facilities that potentially we could have satellite campuses, for lack of a better term, at. And we have been in talks with your community and in South Georgia about potentially doing that, if not us proper, but working with your community to create something like us so that your veterans have a place where they can physically go and get those same types of resources.
And I'm glad you're in talks. I'd like to make a request.
Yes, sir.
And I think most representatives would agree with this. When you go into talks, would you give someone who has to put the money in the budget a heads up if you're in our districts? I mean, that's the first I knew you were even in talks.
We're not that far into talks where we need money.
Well, okay, well, that's good. Now you can begin to bring us in the loop, because far too often with state agencies in Georgia, you know, I get to read about it, or I get to talk about it when they come to ask for the funding for it.
Absolutely,
And I'm
sir.
just asking that you keep that in mind. And being a military person, I'm sure you understand.
Yes, sir.
Your CG never wanted to hear it from the battalion after it was done on his
Absolutely.
post. Okay, just a
Yes,
little
sir.
hint. Word to the wise.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And that's one of the reasons we're having this, Representative Williams, is the fact that I want all the players to be in to know about the different programs. I think Vector's amazing what's going on, and they possibly can expand it. I mean, again, it's a pilot program that started out. It's doing great. Let's expand it. That's my intention, and I think the sports tour would be a good place to have.
I'm glad I came because I wouldn't have known about the conversation. And
Well, that's
a
right.
lot of folk not here. And I still say, Mr. Chairman, the conversation needs to be inclusive of those of us, as the dean has said, who make public policy. Because eventually it has to cross us to talk about the money. I'm on appropriations, dean's on appropriations, and you know, I still contend. I'm glad you're here. And this is not personal. This is because you bring a lot to the table, and Vector is great. But let's don't find out about it in the streets. When we start the conversation, it's like I say, and I hate to keep saying this, but I have the highest military and veterans population percentage-wise in
Yes, sir, you do.
Georgia. I think I should have been informed that we're talking down in your area, Representative. That's all.
Well,
I'm fine with
And
it.
I'm not saying we're looking to expand in your area. I'm just saying
I am
that-
saying I hope you are. You said you had started some talk, and
Well,
it's
we're
time
talking
to
about
talk.
bringing some programs to us from your area, and there might be a possibility in an existing structure. I won't take it any further than that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We might be secretive on something we're going to have to talk about.
But
So I'll be glad
right
to talk
now
with you
it's-
offline if
there's
you
no
can't talk, but I'm going to want to
appropriations.
hear about it.
So,
Okay?
yes, sir.
Any other questions for Colonel? Well, thank you so much, Colonel.
Thank
Appreciate it. The next we're going to have the USG and the TCSG. My apologies on the agenda. I forgot to mention Robert Cowan as well, but we'll start with David Snow if you don't mind, and we'll take to Robert afterwards.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. It's a pleasure to speak with you again. Dr. David Snow, I'm the Director of Military Affairs for the University System of Georgia. I'll give you about a 2 or 3 minute quick overview of some highlights since we spoke to you last, I guess in February. And then you're going to hear, we've got representatives from 9 different institutions here, and you're going to hear specifically from 4 people for about 3 to 4 minutes max. Georgia Gwinnett College, Georgia Tech, University of West Georgia, and the 4-H outreach program at UGA that they do for military affiliated. So just a couple reminders about where we've been and kind of what we're doing. As a system, we are the only state when Military Times ranks best for vets schools in the nation. They pick 130 last year based on academic reputation, quality of support services, affordability, et cetera. We're the only state. We had 2 publics in the top 10. We had 4 in the top 51, and 5 out of the 130 in the nation were from USG schools. And TCSG had number 1 for the 2-year schools. So we're doing some good things here in the state on the education side. Tomorrow I will be at a ribbon cutting down at Georgia College, and that will be 100% of USG schools have a dedicated space on campus for military affiliated students. That was about a third just a few years ago. Right as of this fall, we have 100% of our schools have either priority registration or a mechanism in place to facilitate priority early registration for student veterans on campus. That used to be 3 schools. So we're 28 out of 28. Our schools are drinking the Kool-Aid. They value the contributions of these students on campus and in their communities. So they're working hard to support them and help them succeed as they transition out. As a matter of fact, in May, we had over 1,200 veterans that schools identified and self-reported graduate with degrees from our USG schools just at the spring graduation. That's up about 45% from 2 years ago when we started. It was 800, then 880. This year was over 1,200. So they are doing well at our USG schools, to the point that last year, PhDs, doctorates, baccalaureate degrees, whatever the case may be. So a lot of those students are well prepared to leave. And I always like to tell the story about where's my Albany guys there? Representative Price, our #1 dental resident 2 years ago at the dental school at Augusta, was a prior enlisted Marine tank driver. He was our #1 student at the dental school. So they're doing great things in Georgia, and we value what they bring to our workforce and to our communities. A couple other things got upcoming that we're hoping to do is a meeting. I just met with and spoke yesterday with the Georgia Public Library System, which also falls under USG. We're going to do some awareness initiatives, if you will. I'm going to speak to all their directors in April, I believe. And then in our libraries, especially in close proximity to bases, have some sessions where we kind of help get the word out about what we're doing as a state and what we have available to offer. Similarly, the folks at Robins Air Force Base, well, they're not here. Their education, Renee Doherty, we're doing a session where I'm going to come in. I've also got stuff from Georgia Student Finance Commission for Hope, but basically a session for military parents of high school kids, you know, making sure they're aware of what we have in our policies and some of the things we have in place for the state. And the last thing I will mention before I pass it over to our first speaker from Georgia Gwinnett is the policies. We look at those to see if we could be doing something different. And the example I want to give you on that is about a year ago, we knew we had them covered if they were currently serving in the military. We waived out of state. If you're here, we want you to go to school, et cetera. If you're recently separated or retired, we knew we had them covered. We could waive out of state. You can come here, go to school. You know, if they aren't using benefits, they can come here, establish residency, start doing what they need to do. And for the VA, they can just come here. They don't have to go through those residency requirements by federal law. So we knew we had them covered if they were serving, and we knew we had them covered if they were separated. But we identified a gap, and Chancellor Huckabee at the time said, yeah, Dave, that sounds good. Let's fix it. So what we did was a dependent child of a currently serving military member, still wearing the cloth of the nation, they wanted to come here and go to school, and they were here before. They could come back here, and we're not going to charge them out of state. Example, did 7th grade through 11th grade, Fort Benning, Georgia. Transfer away my senior year, parents go to Fort Hood, Texas. Congratulations, son, daughter, you graduated high school. Where do you want to go to school? Well, all my friends are back at Columbus State. Previously, they would have been out of state because they weren't stationed here and they weren't recently separated or retired. So we said, well, why penalize them because they're still continuing to serve? So we made that where if they were stationed here within the previous 5 years or completed 1 year of high school, they could come back here and go to school. So that's just another example of what we're doing. So as always, we thank you for this opportunity to tell you about what we're doing as a system, and more importantly, really at the tactical level, what our great institutions are doing, because all of our schools have been recognized as military friendly on at least one of the various listings, and you're going to get a chance to hear from a few of them now. Briefly, John Mason from Georgia Gwinnett College will go first, and then we're going to have Georgia Tech, University of West Georgia, and then our 4-H representative. Pending any questions, or we can field them at the end. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and fellow committee members, my name is John Mason. I'm from Georgia Gwinnett College, the Veteran Success Coordinator there. Thank you for allowing me to brief you real quickly on the student veteran success work at Georgia Gwinnett College, especially this last year that we've accomplished. Throughout this year, however, I must say thanks to my fellow USG colleges for sharing best practices. As you know, that's how you move forward and help the veteran the most. When it comes to veterans, we're truly a mission of one team, one fight. We share postings of companies and employers that want to hire veterans throughout each other throughout the year. And of course, that helps stay in connect with everybody. At Georgia Gwinnett College, we focus on a 3-step process. These processes are assimilation into college life, engagement doing, and of course that helps stay in connect with everybody. At Georgia Gwinnett College, we focus on a 3-step process. These processes are assimilation into college life, engagement during your college career, and the most important probably, transitioning to corporate America or small business environment. We've engaged the SBA, the state of Georgia, quite a bit because not everybody can see themselves sitting behind a desk. They want to start their own business. We believe assimilation of a veteran college is crucial. Whether the veteran has been discharged from the military 5 years ago or from the combat zone 2 weeks ago, we believe that it's vital. At Georgia Gwinnett College, we make it easy to assimilate by offering military and veteran personal tours to the campus, one-on-one mentorship, and allow student veterans to help new veterans in the process of enrolling in college. The concept is very simple: veterans helping veterans. Engagement is crucial during the veterans' college career. Student veterans stay engaged by joining the Veteran Club on campus, which offers many ways to remain active on and off campus. On campus, student veterans conduct patriotic events such as reading the Constitution on the main lawn. Each year, the campus also invites all military affiliate students, and the community to attend our annual Veterans Day event. Off campus, the Veterans of Foreign Wars host a student veteran club each quarter at a barbecue or just a typical hosting. Staying active in the local community is a way for veterans to continue a tradition of service. Transition, we mentioned that. The last process is crucial. Transitioning to corporate America is challenging for any student veteran or any student these days, but particularly the veteran population. Georgia Gwinnett College assists with transitioning by focus on heavy networking, such as the Gwinnett Young Professional Organizations, which is a member of the Gwinnett Chamber of Commerce. Veterans use tools on campus, such as resume building, mock interviews, and asking the community to engage veterans who are interested in the field of study that the student is actually studying. The veteran community is strong on the Georgia Gwinnett College campus, with over 10 events a year specifically related to military veteran topics. GGC is truly a military college. Just last month, the Student Veteran Club hosted a very first suicide prevention event. The event consisted of doing 22 push-ups to represent the 22 veterans that unfortunately commit suicide every day. For the main event, over 150 staff, faculty, and students formed on the main lawn and knocked out 22 push-ups, to include our president of the college and senior leadership of the college, which was pretty awesome. Veterans are unique and want to help bring awareness not only to veterans, but also the entire campus. With the last suicide prevention event, awareness, the mission to bring awareness was accomplished. It was a great turnout. I will end by quoting from my current president of the college, Dr. Stanley Procheski: "Going to college does you no good. Graduating college means the world." Our three-step process works to make sure our veteran population succeeds and continues to influence the world. At this time, I can take any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the committee? I really like that 22 push-up thing. That is really cool, because it's amazing. 22 a day. It's staggering, and we're not, for some reason this nation is not doing a good job of reaching out to those people, and it's sad.
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to have Dave Ross from Georgia Tech. One thing I did want to mention, John mentioned the best practices from our schools. Last time we met with you, somebody recommended, because we were getting together kind of ad hoc, to have a summit, and we had a USG military summit last April.
Great.
With over 50 participants, including the Rosalind Carter Institute down in Americus and the Small Business Administration as well.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. I'm Dave Ross, Dr. Dave Ross from Georgia Tech. And hey, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the programs that we have. You know, we're all doing about the same things in the USG. We all work together, but one of the big programs that we're excited about is our Pathways program. You probably heard about this maybe. It's a program that allows someone that's recently separated within the last 3 to 5 years and come in as long as they meet the requirements. Of course, you know, it's hard to get into Georgia Tech. We all know that. So, you know, as long as they have the requirements, GPA, they can come right in without going through the normal 20,000 applicants and we only take 3. They'll come right in. Now, of course, this is only in the sciences field, but that's great because we have the computer science program, so that's a good thing. Another program that I'm partnering with is 4Block. This is an organization, it's a nonprofit organization. They've moved into Atlanta now, and what they do is they take our students and teach them resume writing, job interview skills, how to dress for success, and we work with local companies within the state, you know, within the state and within, you know, mostly within the perimeter of Atlanta, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Coca-Cola, the Arthur C. Blank Foundation, and so forth. So those are the companies we work with. Another thing that we're doing on campus is partnering with, you know, of course, like our career services, are the companies that hire our vets or hire our students. I'm recently just worked with a Southern company, Harris Company, and what I'm looking for are maybe some Georgia Tech alumni to come back and help, you know, help with this, with the recruiting. But also, I'm working with recent graduates from Georgia Tech that are student veterans that have just graduated coming back and recruiting students for their companies that they're working for. So that's a good program. And last, I know you've all heard about our professional education side with our Vet Squared program. That's a big program over in Savannah where we're taking people who are just not leaving the military. Dr. James Wilburn's working on that program over there. And we take, students that come right, or I'm sorry, the active military that are coming right out of the service and getting them connected with jobs, getting them connected with corporations that can hire them. So other than that, that's pretty much what I have. Do you have any questions?
Thanks, sir. The program, Dr. Wilbur, is amazing what they're doing down there. It really is incredible. Thanks, sir.
All right, thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Tim McGowan. I'm the Assistant Director at the Center for Adult Learners and Veterans at the University of West Georgia. The Center for Adult Learners and Veterans, which we call CALV at the university, was established in 2014, and we serve all military-connected students at the center. In terms of the population right now, we house the school certifying official, and just to give you a sense of how many we're serving, we did about 300 certifications for the ongoing fall semester. So that's who we serve. In terms of our mission, basically, we'd like to think we serve as a liaison service between ourselves, our military-connected students, and all the departments across the campus. That includes both when they're considering becoming a student, when they become a student, and of course, when they transition from the university. In terms of some of the programs that we focused on over the past year, just to highlight 4 of them in terms of meeting that mission. One of the things that we did this past year that we're very proud of, we started what was called a JST review process, JST standing for the Joint Service Transcript. And basically that's a process to see that, or to help veterans get academic credit for the learning that they experience through their training or their military occupational specialties. So we developed this process. As a result of that process, we submitted about 40 recommendations to various academic departments, and we had about a 55% success rate with that. So we're very proud of that. The other thing that we implemented the past year, which you've probably heard of before, is something called Green Zone training. That's an effort to basically improve the cultural competence of staff and faculty members across the university in terms of our military population. We implemented it in the spring of the year. We've had 4 sessions, and up to this point, we've trained about 60 faculty and staff members through that program. A third thing that we've done, and talking about transition into the workforce, just to give you an example of what we do in that regard, on Tuesday of this week, we hosted a recruiting session that was targeted for military members of our community, and it was an overflow crowd, but the one reason that was because it was a little company called Amazon that did the recruiting. So that was one reason why we had such a great turnout. And finally, the one thing I'd like to say is that because of these efforts and your support, our military-connected students are having success at the University of West Georgia. Just to give you an example, in a recent semester, we had about 20 military-connected identified students get straight A's. So one of the things that we instituted in the spring of this year to recognize that success is we actually had an adult learner veteran recognition ceremony where we recognized those people that have done really well. We recognized people for academic achievement, for research, for community and university engagement, and as well we also recognize, we also recognize faculty and staff members as veteran-friendly members of our staff of the year. So those are 4 examples of the types of programs that we have at the University of West Georgia. Questions?
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The U.S. Army changes 250,000 diapers every day. Now, I'm not sure if General Gerard can share with us the number of bullets that the U.S. Army fires every day. I'm Casey Mull. I'm a public service faculty member at the University of Georgia, working on our 4-H youth development staff. The military operates the world's largest employer-sponsored child care program. from age 6 weeks old all the way up to age 18, the U.S. military is going to take care of a child or a youth in their before and after school care programs, as well as in their child care facilities. 4-H is one of several national partners in the before and after school care programs. Now, what does this mean for Georgia specifically? It means that we have 4-H faculty and staff members that are assisting with the training of the military civilian staff members that are taking care of those young people each day. We serve military youth on military installations across our state through 4-H clubs, and the military services require that these clubs focus on STEM or STEAM programming, as well as on healthy living. It's something that's natural in all of our 4-H programs across the state. Now, what the military likes most, however, about working with organizations like 4-H is our force multiplier effect. We extend the walls of their facilities. Several people have commented that about a third of the military population lives on post or on base currently. By working with Cooperative Extension, by working with 4-H, we're able to extend the walls of their facilities to serve more youth than they would be able to serve alone. And in fact, in Georgia, we have over 8,500 young people that are military dependents enrolled in Georgia 4-H. What this integration of military youth into our traditional 4-H programming offers is us to be able to provide a bridge and building an understanding within civilian populations of the importance of service to military families and how to better serve them. Geographically dispersed audiences are our bread and butter in Cooperative Extension, and that's what the military really appreciates about our 4-H military partnership. Reservists such as myself and National Guard members that live in every community across Georgia are able to be served through the 4-H program, even though their parent may live 50, 100, 200 miles away from the closest military installation. This last year, we hosted several camps for military dependents and had over 570 kids attend exclusive weeks of camp for military dependents. And this was serving not only youth from Georgia, but also we've been selected as a national partner for these camps and have served youth from about 45 other states and territories. Next year, we will serve about 775 or more youth through these camping opportunities, and this represents an investment of about $1.3 million in federal contracts and grants to fund these opportunities. But with all of these strengths and programs that we offer, perhaps there's nothing more impactful than the change that occurs in an individual youth. A youth like Sophia Rodriguez, Mr. Williams, an Army dependent from your area, with her program in the Leadership in Action Project, has helped develop coping skills among other military youth residing in the Fort Stewart coverage area. Caitlin Connor is another young person from Vermont. She got on a plane for the first time because of the 4-H military partnership. And then also youth like Ben Mayfield, who was able to connect with other youth experiencing deployment at an exclusive week of military camp when he was the only person in his school experiencing deployment. It's through the 4-H Positive Youth Development Program that young people are becoming better equipped to be positive contributing citizens each and every day, whether they remain in Georgia to come to one of our University System of Georgia schools, or whether they're family PCSs and they take their 4-H experience with them. We have young people across Georgia and across the country that are pledging their heads for clearer thinking, their hearts for greater loyalty, their hands to larger service, and their health to better living, for their clubs in Georgia and beyond, and certainly for our world. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, that's with the USG side. If anybody has any questions, we have representatives from, like I said, 9 of our institutions: Atlanta Metro, Savannah State, Georgia State, Augusta, whom I'm missing about Oscar State, and you've already met the
Well,
others.
thank you, sir. I really appreciate all your work. When do the military-friendly rankings usually come out? Typically?
There's various listings. The
Yes.
Military Times one, I think they just finished the exhaustive 100-page survey or 100-question. That usually comes out the next couple of months.
It's not about that, but it is nice to have that recognition, obviously. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I really do appreciate all the work y'all doing. You really do very good things for Georgia veterans, and makes us look really good. Representative Williams?
Sir, didn't want to let this opportunity pass. When you said Savannah State, that's home. I just wanted to, remind the committee that out of that little school in southeast Georgia, 2 flag officers and a general officer, the Naval ROTC program.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, sir. And Robert Cowell, you want to speak just very briefly?
I was there.
And thank y'all for this time. And briefly, the Technical College System of Georgia, I'm back here listening to everything we're talking about. It's what we do. And one of the things that I realized with the military, in my old life, I was Air Force, and I worked in what was called maintenance training, which is exactly what the Technical College System does. You go in, you learn your career, you learn your job, and you go to work. And that's what we're looking for with our military here in the state of Georgia, the economic impact that was mentioned earlier. Not only do they have the engine, but also those individuals who leave that go to work for our employers. And we are training that workforce. So we're not only the educational side, we're also the workforce development side. But I do want to tell you some of the things that we've done. After our last meeting and so forth, I had the opportunity to go back and kind of reflect on what could we be doing better. So we got with Commissioner Roby and actually went up and met with his staff, and I took some of my senior leadership and some of the executive directors up there, and we started walking through and talking through everything that the Technical College System does, and it's like, okay, you guys are doing some great stuff. And we said, yes, we are. And then I can't remember Brian's last name, but I can. Yes, he asked me. He said, "How are you communicating it?" And I kind of stopped and thought, okay, that's it. That's the key, and it's pretty much what we've landed on a lot in here. We're all doing a lot of good stuff. It's that communication effort, and like Colonel Ross had said with the Vector Center, they've got a communication plan. So I actually took that back as an action item. And I'm in the process of working with all of our technical colleges to walk through how are you getting this out, and are you your websites, your Twitter accounts, your Facebook accounts, how are you getting this word out locally, and then also how are we doing it at a state level as well. And had a chance to sit in a conference a couple of weeks ago, and a gentleman talked about focus groups for the student services side. I kind of wrote myself a note, and I said, that's what we also need to do. So I've set out, got some feelers out to our schools, and we are actually going to be setting up military student focus groups to go in and say, I think I know what you need, but I need to let them tell me, what was your experience like? What could we have done better? What did we do well? And then we're going to centralize all of that and then display that out to the 22 schools and allow them to kind of choose and pick from that. And also, one thing that we've been working on very diligently is the military credit. When the people get out of the military, they walk in. I was a jet engine mechanic, but I did not have the credentials to go to work. I would have had to go back and get my EMP license, et cetera, et cetera. But I could have started school if they would have accepted it. I chose a different path. But with that said, we do a lot of that. But again, what we found was we were siloed. This college was doing it this way, this college was doing it that way, this college was doing it that way. So we've joined our efforts, and we actually have got a templated system that we're putting in that actually came from the conference that we had back in April, I think it was, and so forth. But anyway, our student information system is called Banner. That's where we capture everything about our students. And we realized there was a way to put the crosswalk, if you will, military 1000 course equals college 1000 course. We've been doing it all along. What we haven't been doing is capturing it for archivability and comparability. So now we've come up with a way. We've got Central Georgia Tech, actually is the one who's leading this effort, is setting it up. So now as this particular welder comes in from the MOS comes in as a welder,
We capture all that. Now we can share that with other colleges throughout the state, so when that type person walks through the door, they have something to start with. They take their joint service transcript, and the process is going to be easier and more understandable for the military member as well as for the faculty member and or the student services that's supporting them. And we're about 90% there. They've designed the template. We're putting a manual together with that, and that will be shared throughout all 22 schools as a standardized way of doing that. And the only other stuff we mentioned today, just to the committee, I'd like to say, one of our strong suits in the state of Georgia is dual enrollment. We've got roughly in the technical college system, I think the last word I heard was this fall, we was pushing 21,000 students. I have no idea how to track whether that's possible. I heard the superintendent mention about the military ID, whether that would be beneficial to say of that 21,000 and or the combined effort, how many dual enrolled students we have, how many of those are military. Again, might be a talking point if that's needed for community and so forth. And the career academies also is a very big bonus that we have throughout the state. I think that's unique to Georgia. That also would be a very uplifting point that we could point out on the educational side. And I don't know if you have career academies in your areas, but those also are valuable resources as well. And I'm open to any questions or if anyone has anything. Yes,
Representative Elam.
We passed a resolution this last session about the military credits. Have you got a chance to look at that?
From the Veteran Service Board? Yeah. Yes, sir, we have. Matter of fact, that was one of the driving factors, going back and making us look at how we were doing it. And so, yes, sir.
Well, thank you. Again, the technical, I think one of the biggest things in education right now is that it's great that everybody goes to college, but not everyone needs to go to college. A lot of folks need to be plumbers and air conditioner repairmen and all this other stuff that we need to make a real living. I wish I was a plumber sometimes. They make more money than I do. But I think the governor's initiative on technical schools and especially the way y'all coordinate with the veterans are great. And I appreciate it.
And the apprenticeship push that's also coming out of the governor's office that we're fully engaged
and the
with.
dual enrollment. It's easier to get a high school education because get these kids into something they actually are interested in versus algebra or English or lit or whatever. So we really do appreciate your work, sir. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
The last item, a briefing item we're going to have before we start to talk about what we're doing is Leah Dixon from the Georgia Conservancy. And it seemed like an odd topic for military, but it actually is very apropos.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for having us here today. I'm Leah Dixon, Advocacy Director at the Georgia Conservancy, and we're here today to talk to you about the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act and the effort for dedicated funding for land conservation. Before I get into the nuts and bolts of the bill, I've got Thomas Farmer here with me from the Nature Conservancy to talk about some of the military-based buffering land conservation that they've been working with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will help put some of this in context. Again, Thomas Farmer with the Nature Conservancy here in Georgia. And the Nature Conservancy, this is my favorite thing to talk about because it's counterintuitive, but we have been working at Fort Benning for almost 20 years now, helping the Army understand what kind of natural resources they have on the base, and then also being very active in helping them buffer the base. And base buffering is an issue in a BRAC environment. It's very interesting in the sense of you've got people that live up against the base where the Army has a lot of fire, a lot of smoke, a lot of noise. That doesn't kind of mesh together. A lot of phone calls might be made with regard to the work that is happening on the base. The other thing that also occurs is the size of these bases, like Fort Stewart and Fort Benning. There are a lot of natural resources and a lot of creatures on that base that the Army has to manage for because of the Endangered Species Act. So in steps the Nature Conservancy, and one of the things that we do is we work actively with willing sellers and landowners to help the Army purchase some of these lands, put together a buffer plan, if you will, and then that, again, helps two things. One, it makes sure that people don't move right up against that baseline. And the second thing it does is it creates a pressure valve release, if you will, for these species that they have to manage for. So, for instance, with red-cockaded woodpeckers on the base, if we can cobble together 11,000 acres, which we just recently did, that is now a wildlife management area. But if we can do that, that takes the pressure off the base, meaning those woodpeckers can also, they need that big land. They can get onto that 11,000 acres. And then if a woodpecker is accidentally killed in, some sort of tank training, no big deal. We've got it covered. So it's interesting and kind of counterintuitive. But going back to one of the things that we just finished in 2014 with the Army and with the Department of Natural Resources here in our state is this 11,000 acre wildlife management area, the Chattahoochee Fall Line Management Area. And, it's a great benefit. So what we're doing is not only are we buffering this base, but we're also providing a great opportunity for our outdoor enthusiasts, hunters, fishers, folks that just want to get out and recreate in nature, a place to go as well. And Leah's going to talk about the economic impact of that, because I think it's one of the things that is undersold here in our state. So just to kind of sum up, what we're looking at is, long term, as we start thinking about a BRAC environment, the more that we can make our bases sustainable, the better off we are. And it's a win, obviously, for the Department of Defense and all of our bases here in Georgia. It's a win for our hunting and fishing community. It's a win for our Georgia economy. Obviously, these bases, I'm preaching to the choir about the economic development impact and the economic impact of these bases. And then finally, it's a win for our natural resources here in our state. Let Leah talk a little bit more about our plan moving forward and how hopefully you all can help us. Thank you, sir.
Again, thanks for having us. Y'all all have a folder at your desks with information about TNC's work, and then kind of a one-pager on the proposed legislation that we have out there. So the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act is an effort by a coalition of conservation organizations in the state of Georgia to establish a dedicated funding source and a long-term funding source for land conservation in Georgia. Currently, those land conservation dollars are appropriated annually, which doesn't always lend itself to a sustainable long-term source for planning, as you have to do with these land conservation deals. The coalition members, before I get started, include the Georgia Conservancy, the Nature Conservancy, the Georgia Wildlife Federation, the Conservation Fund, the Trust for Public Land, and Park Pride. During this last legislative session, we had the Georgia Municipal Association, the Association of County Commissioners, the Georgia Chamber, and the Georgia Hunting and Fishing Federation join on as stakeholders of the group. As I've mentioned, we've got some proposed legislation in two forms. House Bill 332 is the enabling legislation that creates the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act and the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Fund. These are both sponsored by Representative Sam Watson. The House resolution is House Resolution 238, and that is the constitutional amendment that would lead to a ballot referendum in November of 2018. Also, we've worked with the governor's office to include military base buffering. As we've talked about, it's a huge conservation benefit. So you'll see on line 36 and line 32 of the House bill, military base buffering is referenced as a conservation benefit and an opportunity for funding. So the proposed funding mechanism would dedicate 75% of the existing sales tax on outdoor recreation, outdoor sporting goods to the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Fund. This fund would generate about $40 million a year. And those, we're proposing for those to be allocated towards three different buckets. The first would be acquisition of priority lands. So through the Department of Natural Resources and guided by the State Wildlife Action Plan, and then also looking at the military base buffering opportunities in the state. The second bucket would be maintenance of these state-owned lands and improved access. So that includes your state parks and your wildlife management areas. And then the third bucket is a local matching fund. So looking at your counties and cities in the state who are interested in a green space project or a trail project, park project, the state would provide some matching funds to those local governments. So we've talked a lot today about economic impacts. I think it's worthy to note that the outdoor recreation industry is a $27 billion industry in the state of Georgia. So it's right up there with military related activities. Additionally, the tourism industry in Georgia is $61 billion. So that, that just kind of leads itself to, people in Georgia like to get outside, and I think they hopefully will like for their dollars to be spent on helping to improve some of our state lands in Georgia. A dedicated source of funding would allow a couple of things: better leverage of private and philanthropic dollars, also better leverage of some federal dollars that we could draw down. It'll allow for more long-term planning, as I've discussed before with the acquisition of these lands. Allow for some more flexibility to solve some of the state's issues that we may face down the road. So for example, attracting more business. The word Amazon is on our brains a lot these days. Statewide droughts. And then we've talked a lot about BRAC today. So showing that there's a state investment into the lands around military bases. And all in all, I think it helps create a better quality of life for all Georgians. And we're happy to take any questions.
Representative Corbin, sorry.
I'll let that go.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
No, that's good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Mr. Farmer. You said you deal with Fort Benning?
Yes, sir.
Exclusively? Do you do other?
No, I should have mentioned that. The Nature Conservancy is a primary partner at Fort Benning and actually also at Townsend Bombing Range, which hadn't been brought up today, but is hugely important for training for Air Force and Navy planes up and down the East Coast, and that's down on the Altamaha River. But there are also buffering programs at Warner Robins, at Fort Stewart. We have had fits and spurts at Fort Gordon, and we also help at Moody as well.
Okay, that was my question. If a base want to get involved with you, how do they do that?
Yes, and I should say that the Department of Defense, the program from where the federal money comes from is called the Readiness and Environmental Protection Initiative. It's in the DoD's annual budget. And I was able to work a lot with former Senator Chambliss' staff when he was on Armed Services to help. It started out as a spit of money, and we grew it, thanks to him, to about $75 million. Georgia has received over the history of this program more of this REPI money than any other state, which is good on us. I mean, I think, again, it shows, one, the importance of our bases to the overall military. But I don't think that's always going to be the case. So if we can create a scenario by which the state helps, I think that obviously helps. But yes, to answer your question, we would be happy to work with any military institution in the state to create a buffering program.
Great. I'd like to talk to you after the meeting.
Yes, sir. Happy to.
Absolutely.
Anybody else?
And how much of this land would be around different bases?
Each military base, so let's take Benning as an example. The Army has folks on the base that work with us, and there's a plan that is created. So it literally, I'm not saying, and I don't have a map today, but I can certainly send you one, that has a plan on where they feel like the population pressures are going to come from, and maybe some other different criteria. And so it's not like they're trying to create a huge swath of land around the entire base. There's some methodology that goes into it. And then obviously to manage for the endangered species that are on their base, they have to, make sure that if they're going to buy something that a gopher tortoise, for instance, could live there, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So there's some method to the project.
But on this HB 332, how much of that land would be geared towards military?
Well, I think that would be up to the governor and you all as members of the Georgia legislature. I mean, from where the Nature Conservancy sits, I think we would like to see more buffering done. But obviously that might compete with some other projects and things like that. But I think that's a healthy competition and a conversation that we'd be more than welcome to have.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? This has been done to great effect in Florida. Hawaii does this a lot.
I should say that there are other state funding programs like this in Florida, Alabama, South Carolina. We are a little late to the table, but certainly something that we hope that you all will consider this legislation as we move forward into the next year.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. At this point, we're going to move into a slightly different phase. If y'all need to go ahead and go, I know it's been a long meeting. We got a few more things to do in reference to our D.C. trip, so I'm probably going to clear the room at this point.
Thank you. Travel safe.
Thank you, Commander Snow. The first thing I'd like to do is talk about the different legislative accomplishments we've done. Again, you've got a list of Georgia House Military Affairs Working Group accomplishments. 9 different visits. We've gotten $2 million a year, $50 million investment in Fort Gordon. We put together that Georgia House Representative Military Affairs report, which we all signed last year. Georgia Military Friendly Guide, I'll talk about that just very briefly, and all the different legislation we've done. It's really amazing, 12 bills and 8 different resolutions by 14 different representatives. And just want to appreciate all the work you did there. Really, it started out with Representative Williams with the licensure. And Representative Williams, are you hearing more conversation about other licensures we've not accomplished?
I haven't heard anything. Last year, when it was brought up that we let the chiefs out, was the last time I think that we painted with a pretty broad brush and uncertain all years about anything that we do. By the way, I'm going to ask, sorry to do it in November, we'll ask council so that we can reintroduce it and vote on it. I want to name HB 245 Tracy Rainey Bill. Since she was the wife of the CG, and she fought that bill every step of the way, pushed every day.
Okay.
And they're at the Pentagon now. That's certainly that's good.
Well, I'm sure we can do that. I'd love to do that. I just keep on hearing from people we need to do more licensure laws, and I think people do not understand that we've done that, and we've done it.
Yeah, it kind of slipped by a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty well covered.
Yeah, but certifications as well. We've done a lot of work on that, so I appreciate that.
You passed a bill 4 or 5 years ago that you get credit for your military service. If you're an electrician, heater, air conditioner person, and you have to go back to state examination to get a license. There's a committee now chaired by a brigadier general that looks at it, and you can be certified. Problem with those things are sometimes you only give them like twice a year. They give it on the 1st of July, and you get out of the military on July 31st. You got to wait 5 months before you take the test to go to work. If you've been a heater air conditioner man in the military for 25 years, you know what you're doing. You'll be able to go right to work. So that was the governor's bill that passed about 4 or 5 years ago.
All right, the second thing I want to talk about is this Georgia Military Friendly Guide. I put a lot of effort into this, and Michael Parks and the forward. I hope y'all that Patrick Love, he's from here, Texas, actually knew Michael Parkerson. He's done a lot of work with us as well, and all this stuff that we put together. But this is the Georgia Military Friendly Guide. My intention is to, once we voted on this, is that y'all are okay with it, is to sent this to the congressman. We'll do it in a color, glossy, put some money into nice printing and binding. It's kind of an attempt just to do what the Florida did